After my wife passed away, my daughter took everything from the supercars to the mansion, then coldly threw me out onto the street. She kept telling me to forget her and move on. With nowhere left to go, I was forced to sort through the few belongings my wife had left behind. That is when I found a note carefully hidden and clearly never meant for my daughter to see. It said, "My love. If you are reading this, check my suitcase. The truth is inside." I opened it and everything changed completely. Before I tell you what was inside that suitcase, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been betrayed by the one person you were supposed to trust. My name is Moses Carter. For 50 years, I was a session bass player. I stood in the shadows of the stage keeping the rhythm for the most famous singers in the world. I never wanted the spotlight. I was happy being the heartbeat in the background. My wife Ruby was my melody. But 2 hours ago, the music stopped forever. I was sitting in the living room of the mansion we had lived in for 40 years. The urn containing Ruby's ashes was resting on my lap. It was heavy, heavier than any bass guitar I had ever held. The house was silent. The guests had left the funeral reception. The condolences were over. I was just an old man sitting in a 5,000 square foot house that suddenly felt like a tomb. Then I heard it. The sound of disrespect. It was the roar of a twin-turbo 5.8 engine revving in the driveway. A Ferrari. My Ferrari. The 488 Spider that Ruby had bought me for our 40th anniversary. I treated that car like a museum piece. I only drove it on Sundays. I never revved the engine cold. But now someone was redlining it right outside my window. The front door burst open. It wasn't the wind. It was my daughter Kesha. She wasn't wearing black. At her own mother's funeral, she had worn a respectful navy dress, but the moment the last guest left, she had changed. Now she was wearing a fire engine red cocktail dress that barely covered her thighs. She was holding a champagne flute in one hand and a heavy-duty black trash bag in the other. She didn't look at me. She didn't ask how I was doing. She walked right up to the recliner where I was sitting and dropped the trash bag at my feet. It landed with a dull thud. "Here's your stuff, Dad," Kesha said. Her voice was light and airy, as if she were talking about the weather and not evicting her father. I looked at the bag. Then I looked at her. "What is this, Kesha?" I asked. My voice was rusty. I hadn't spoken much in days. "It is your clothes," Kesha said, taking a sip of champagne. "And your toiletries. And that old razor you use. Gavin and I talked about it. We need this room. Gavin is going to turn it into a VR gym. He needs the space for his metaverse workouts." I tightened my grip on the urn. "This is my house, Kesha," I said. "I bought this chair. I bought this floor. Your mother and I built this life." Kesha laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. "Actually, Mom built this life," she said. "You just played backup, like you always do. And now that Mom is gone, things are changing. We can't have you moping around here depressing the vibe." "We are influencers, Dad. Our brand is about youth and energy. Having a grieving old man in the background of our stories is bad for engagement." She pulled a phone out of her pocket and checked her reflection in the screen. "We booked you a room at the Motel 6 on the highway," she said. "Paid for a whole week. You should be grateful." I stood up. My knees popped. I am 73 years old, but I am still 6 feet 2. I still have the hands of a man who wrestled steel strings for a living. "You are kicking me out?" I asked, my voice rising. 2 hours after we buried your mother." Kesha rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Dad. We are just reallocating resources. You don't need a mansion. You need a nap." Suddenly, the front door opened again. Gavin walked in. My son-in-law. The man who called himself a visionary but had never built anything real in his life. He was 32 years old and wore sunglasses indoors. He was spinning a keyring on his finger. The Ferrari keyring. "Whoa, listen to that purr," Gavin said, grinning at Kesha. "Babe, your dad kept that engine tight. It runs smooth. I'm going to wrap it in matte black tomorrow. That red is too vintage." He looked at me. He didn't take off his sunglasses. "Hey, Mo," Gavin said. He never called me Dad or Mr. Carter, just Mo. "Hope you are packed, buddy. I have a contractor coming in at 8 a.m. to rip out this carpet." "Put the keys down, Gavin," I said. My voice was low. It was the low E string on a bass vibrating the floorboards. Gavin laughed. He tossed the keys in the air and caught them. "Relax, Mo. You are too old for that car. Your reflexes are shot. Imagine if you scratched it. It would tank the resale value." "Resale value?" I asked. "You are selling my car." Technically, it is the estate's car, Gavin said. And since Kesha is the sole heir to the Ruby Carter brand, we are liquidating the non-essential assets. We are pivoting to crypto Mo. The future. You wouldn't understand. I took a step toward him. The urn was still in my left hand. I made a fist with my right. Get out of my house, I roared. Gavin stopped smiling. He stepped back, but Kesha stepped forward. She put a hand on my chest. Her fingernails were long and sharp. Stop it, Dad, she hissed. Do not make this ugly. You have no legal standing here. Mom put everything in the LLC, and I am the face of the brand, which means I own the house, I own the car, and I own the chair you were sitting in. She pushed me. It wasn't a hard push, but I was off balance. I stumbled back. You are a burden, Dad, Kesha said, her face twisting into something ugly. You have always been a burden. Mom carried you for 40 years. I am not going to do it for 40 more. She grabbed the trash bag from the floor and threw it toward the open door. It slid across the marble floor and tumbled onto the porch. Gavin walked over to the corner of the room. There was an old leather suitcase sitting there. It was brown scuffed and covered in stickers from tours we did in the 80s. Paris, Tokyo, London. It was the case Ruby used to carry her sheet music in. Is this garbage yours too? Gavin asked, kicking the suitcase. That belongs to Ruby, I said. Well, Ruby doesn't need it anymore, Gavin said. He picked it up by the handle. He walked to the door and threw it out into the rain. It landed on top of the trash bag. He looked at me. He pointed to the door. Go, Gavin said, before I call security. And Mo, don't come back until you have an appointment. We are going to be very busy spending your inheritance. I looked at them, my daughter and her husband, standing in the house I paid for, holding the keys to the car I drove, drinking the champagne I bought. I didn't say a word. There are no words for that level of betrayal. I looked down at the urn in my hands. Come on, Ruby, I whispered to the ashes. Let's get out of here. The acoustics in this place have gone bad. I walked to the door. I stepped out onto the porch. The rain hit me instantly cold and sharp. I heard the heavy oak door slam shut behind me. I heard the lock turn. Click. I was outside. I walked down the steps. The water soaked through my suit in seconds. I picked up the black trash bag with my clothes. Then I looked at the leather suitcase lying in a puddle. Kesha thought it was trash. Gavin thought it was empty. I picked it up. It was heavy, heavier than I remembered. I walked down the long driveway. The automatic gates were slowly closing. I slipped through just before they clanged shut. I stood on the sidewalk. I had no car, no home, no money, just a bag of clothes, an urn, and a wet leather suitcase. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw the lights go on in the master bedroom, my bedroom. They thought they had taken everything. They thought they had stripped me bare. But as I gripped the handle of that old suitcase, I felt something shift inside, a loose object sliding against the leather. They didn't know that Ruby never did anything without a reason. They didn't know that the woman who wrote the greatest hits of the 90s didn't leave her finale up to chance. I turned my back on the mansion and started walking toward the city lights. The baseline of my life had just changed tempo. It was going to be a long, dark walk. But I wasn't walking alone. I had Ruby. And I had her suitcase. After my wife passed away, my daughter took everything from the Supercars to the mansion, then coldly threw me out onto the street. She kept telling me to forget her and move on. With nowhere left to go, I was forced to sort through the few belongings my wife had left behind. That is when I found a note carefully hidden and clearly never meant for my daughter to see. It said, "My love, if you are reading this, check my suitcase." The truth is inside. I opened it, and everything changed completely. Before I tell you what was inside that suitcase, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been betrayed by the one person you were supposed to trust. My name is Moses Carter. For 50 years, I was a session bass player. I stood in the shadows of the stage, keeping the rhythm for the most famous singers in the world. I never wanted the spotlight. I was happy being the heartbeat in the background. My wife Ruby was my melody. But 2 hours ago, the music stopped forever. I was sitting in the living room of the mansion we had lived in for 40 years. The urn containing Ruby's ashes was resting on my lap. It was heavy, heavier than any bass guitar I had ever held. The house was silent. The guests had left the funeral reception. The condolences were over. I was just an old man sitting in a 5,000 square foot house that suddenly felt like a tomb. Then I heard it. The sound of disrespect. It was the roar of a twin-turbo V8 engine revving in the driveway. A Ferrari. My Ferrari. The 488 Spider that Ruby had bought me for our 40th anniversary. I treated that car like a museum piece. I only drove it on Sundays. I never revved the engine cold. But now someone was redlining it right outside my window. The front door burst open. It wasn't the wind. It was my daughter Kesha. She wasn't wearing black. At her own mother's funeral, she had worn a respectful navy dress, but the moment the last guest left, she had changed. Now she was wearing a fire engine red cocktail dress that barely covered her thighs. She was holding a champagne flute in one hand and a heavy-duty black trash bag in the other. She didn't look at me. She didn't ask how I was doing. She walked right up to the recliner where I was sitting and dropped the trash bag at my feet. It landed with a dull thud. "Here is your stuff," Dad Kesha said. Her voice was light and airy, as if she were talking about the weather and not evicting her father. I looked at the bag, then I looked at her. "What is this, Kesha?" I asked. My voice was rusty. I hadn't spoken much in days. "It is your clothes," Kesha said, taking a sip of champagne. "And your toiletries, and that old razor you use. Gavin and I talked about it. We need this room. Gavin is going to turn it into a VR gym. He needs the space for his metaverse workouts." I tightened my grip on the urn. "This is my house, Kesha," I said. "I bought this chair. I bought this floor. Your mother and I built this life." Kesha laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. "Actually, Mom built this life," she said. "You just played backup, like you always do. And now that Mom is gone, things are changing. We can't have you moping around here depressing the vibe. We are influencers, Dad. Our brand is about youth and energy. Having a grieving old man in the background of our stories is bad for engagement." She pulled a phone out of her pocket and checked her reflection in the screen. "We booked you a room at the Motel 6 on the highway," she said. "Paid for a whole week. You should be grateful." I stood up. My knees popped. I am 73 years old, but I am still 6'2". I still have the hands of a man who wrestled steel strings for a living. "You are kicking me out?" I asked, my voice rising. 2 hours after we buried your mother." Kesha rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Dad. We are just reallocating resources. You don't need a mansion. You need a nap." Suddenly the front door opened again. Gavin walked in. My son-in-law, the man who called himself a visionary but had never built anything real in his life. He was 32 years old and wore sunglasses indoors. He was spinning a key ring on his finger. The Ferrari key ring. "Whoa! Listen to that purr," Gavin said, grinning at Kesha. "Babe, your dad kept that engine tight. It runs smooth. I am going to wrap it in matte black tomorrow. That red is too vintage." He looked at me. He didn't take off his sunglasses. "Hey, Mo," Gavin said. He never called me Dad. Or Mr. Carter. Just Mo. "Hope you are packed, buddy. I have a contractor coming in at 8 a.m. to rip out this carpet. Put the keys down." "Gavin," I said. My voice was low. It was the low E string on a bass vibrating the floorboards. Gavin laughed. He tossed the keys in the air and caught them. "Relax, Mo. You are too old for that car. Your reflexes are shot. Imagine if you scratched it. It would tank the resale value." "Resale value?" I asked. "You are selling my car." "Technically, it is the estate's car," Gavin said. "And since Kesha is the sole heir to the Ruby Carter brand, we are liquidating the non-essential assets. We are pivoting to Crypto Mo, the future. You wouldn't understand." I took a step toward him. The urn was still in my left hand. I made a fist with my right. "Get out of my house!" I roared. Gavin stopped smiling. He stepped back, but Kesha stepped forward. She put a hand on my chest. Her fingernails were long and sharp. "Stop it, Dad," she hissed. "Do not make this ugly. You have no legal standing here. Mom put everything in the LLC, and I am the face of the brand, which means I own the house, I own the car, and I own the chair you were sitting in." She pushed me. It wasn't a hard push, but I was off balance. I stumbled back. "You are a burden," Dad Kesha said, her face twisting into something ugly. "You have always been a burden. Mom carried you for 40 years. I am not going to do it for 40 more. She grabbed the trash bag from the floor and threw it toward the open door. It slid across the marble floor and tumbled onto the porch. Gavin walked over to the corner of the room. There was an old leather suitcase sitting there. It was brown scuffed and covered in stickers from tours we did in the 80s. Paris, Tokyo, London. It was the case Ruby used to carry her sheet music in. Is this garbage yours too? Gavin asked, kicking the suitcase. That belongs to Ruby, I said. Well, Ruby doesn't need it anymore, Gavin said. He picked it up by the handle. He walked to the door and threw it out into the rain. It landed on top of the trash bag. He looked at me. He pointed to the door. Go, Gavin said, before I call security. And Mo, don't come back until you have an appointment. We are going to be very busy spending your inheritance. I looked at them, my daughter and her husband, standing in the house I paid for, holding the keys to the car I drove, drinking the champagne I bought. I didn't say a word. There are no words for that level of betrayal. I looked down at the urn in my hands. Come on, Ruby, I whispered to the ashes. Let's get out of here. The acoustics in this place have gone bad. I walked to the door. I stepped out onto the porch. The rain hit me instantly cold and sharp. I heard the heavy oak door slam shut behind me. I heard the lock turn. Click. I was outside. I walked down the steps. The water soaked through my suit in seconds. I picked up the black trash bag with my clothes. Then I looked at the leather suitcase lying in a puddle. Kesha thought it was trash. Gavin thought it was empty. I picked it up. It was heavy, heavier than I remembered. I walked down the long driveway. The automatic gates were slowly closing. I slipped through just before they clanged shut. I stood on the sidewalk. I had no car, no home, no money, just a bag of clothes, an urn, and a wet leather suitcase. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw the lights go on in the master bedroom, my bedroom. They thought they had taken everything. They thought they had stripped me bare. But as I gripped the handle of that old suitcase, I felt something shift inside. A loose object sliding against the leather. They didn't know that Ruby never did anything without a reason. They didn't know that the woman who wrote the greatest hits of the 90s didn't leave her finale up to chance. I turned my back on the mansion and started walking toward the city lights. The baseline of my life had just changed tempo. It was going to be a long, dark walk. But I wasn't walking alone. I had Ruby, and I had her suitcase. The city changes when you lose your keys. It stops being a playground and starts being a predator. I walked for 3 hours in the rain. My Italian leather shoes, the ones Ruby bought me for the Grammys 5 years ago, were soaked through. They squelched against the pavement with every step a pathetic rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. I tried to buy a coffee at a bodega on 4th Street just to get out of the cold. When I tapped my card, the machine beeped a harsh red error. Declined. I tried again. Declined. Kesha had been thorough. She hadn't just evicted me, she had erased me. The clerk looked at my wetsuit and my shaking hands and told me to move along. I was no longer Moses Carter, the respected musician. I was just another old man taking up space. I didn't go to the motel. I couldn't. The idea of sleeping in a sterile room paid for by the daughter who just kicked me out made my stomach turn. Instead, I gravitated toward the only place that felt real anymore. The Bottoms. It was the neighborhood where I grew up. The neighborhood where I met Ruby 45 years ago. Back then, we were just two kids with big dreams and empty pockets. Now I was back with empty pockets, but the dreams were dead. I found shelter under the overpass of the I-95 highway. The concrete was cold, colder than the marble floors I had just left, but it was dry. The wind howled through the pillars, carrying the smell of exhaust and wet trash. I sat down on the curb, hugging the wet suitcase to my chest. My hands were shaking, not just from the temperature, but from the shock. I wasn't alone for long. Shadows detached themselves from the graffiti-covered wall. 3 of them. Young men in oversized hoodies walking with that predatory slide that I knew too well. They saw an old man in a wetsuit with a leather bag. They didn't see a person. They saw a payday. "Yo, Pops," the leader said. He was tall with a scar running through his eyebrow. He flicked a pocket knife open. The blade caught the dim light of the street lamp. "Run that bag and the watch." I looked at the knife, then I looked at his face. The streetlights from the highway above cast harsh shadows, but I recognized the eyes. I recognized the way he held his shoulders tight and defensive. "Put the knife away, Darius," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when a drummer rushed the tempo. The kid froze. He squinted at me, stepping closer, but keeping the blade up. "How do you know my name, old man?" he asked. "I know your name because I taught you the difference between a major and a minor chord 10 years ago," I said. "I gave you your first bass guitar. It was a Fender Jazz Sunburst finish. You promised me you would practice your scales. You sat on my front porch and told me music was going to be your way out. Darius dropped his hand. The aggression vanished, replaced by shock. He leaned in, peering at my face through the rain. "Uncle Mo," he whispered. He turned to the other two boys who were circling behind me. Back off. Back off right now. That is Uncle Mo, the legend." They lowered their shoulders. In this neighborhood, being a musician still meant something. Being a teacher meant even more. In a place where fathers often disappeared, I had been the one constant for a lot of these boys. "What are you doing here?" Mo, Darius asked, looking at my soaked clothes. He sounded heartbroken. "I saw the news, man. I thought you were living in the hills. I thought you were rich." "I was," I said. "But the hills have landslides, son." Darius looked at the suitcase. He looked at my shivering hands. "You need a place to crash," he asked. "My grandma has a couch. It ain't much, but it is warm." "No," I said. "I just need a minute. Just a minute to think. I need to figure out my next move." Darius nodded. He understood pride. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "Get some coffee, Mo," he said, shoving it into my hand. "And stay close to the wall. The wind is brutal tonight." He signaled his crew and they faded back into the shadows. They didn't rob me. They paid me tribute. It was the first act of kindness I had received all day, and it came from a kid holding a knife. I waited until they were gone. Then I looked at the suitcase. I was freezing. My teeth were chattering. I hoped Ruby had packed my heavy wool sweater, or maybe my winter coat. I laid the case flat on the concrete. The latches were rusted, but they clicked open with a satisfying snap. I lifted the lid, expecting the smell of dry cleaning or wool. My heart sank. There were no clothes, no sweater, no coat. The suitcase was filled with paper, stacks and stacks of yellowed composition notebooks. I recognized them instantly. They were Ruby's journals, the ones she used to carry everywhere in the 80s and 90s. I picked one up. It smelled like lavender and old paper. It smelled like her. I opened it. The pages were covered in her handwriting, chaotic scribbles, lyrics, chord progressions written in red ink. I flipped through them. These weren't just doodles. These were the original manuscripts. I saw the lyrics to Midnight Train. I saw the bridge to Smooth Operator. Songs that had won Grammys for other people. Songs that the world thought were written by pop stars but were actually written by a black woman at her kitchen table in Detroit while I played bass in the corner. I dug deeper. Under the notebooks there were a few cassette tapes labeled only with dates. And at the very bottom, taped to the silk lining of the suitcase, was a thick envelope. It was sealed with red wax, Ruby's signature seal. On the front, in her elegant flowing script, it said, "For Mo, the only one who knows the true melody." My hands trembled as I touched the envelope. It felt heavy, thick. It didn't feel like a letter. It felt like a contract. I was about to rip it open when a flash of light caught my eye. Across the street, in the window of an electronics store, a wall of televisions was playing the late-night news. The blue light spilled out onto the wet sidewalk, illuminating the trash and the puddles. I saw a face I knew. It was Kesha. She was standing in front of my garage. She was wearing the red dress. She was smiling that fake camera-ready smile that she practiced in the mirror. Behind her, a tow truck was loading my Ferrari onto a flatbed. I stood up and walked toward the window, pressing my hand against the cold glass. The closed captioning ran across the bottom of the screen. Influencer Kesha Carter announces charity auction of late mother's estate. Charity, I whispered. The word tasted like bile. The camera zoomed in on Kesha. She was wiping a fake tear from her eye. It is what my mother would have wanted, the caption read. "We are selling these assets to start a new chapter. We call it the Fresh Start Fund. We want to give back to the community." I watched as Gavin walked into the frame. He slapped the hood of the Ferrari like it was a piece of meat. He was laughing. He wasn't mourning. He was calculating how much crypto he could buy. They weren't donating anything. They were selling my life to pay for their lifestyle. They were erasing Ruby's memory for a quick buck to cover Gavin's gambling debts. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. Then I looked back at the screen where my daughter was selling my car. Kesha thought she was holding the keys to the kingdom. She didn't know she was selling the only thing that could have saved her. I tucked the envelope into my inside pocket right next to my beating heart. I closed the suitcase. I snapped the latches shut. The cold didn't bother me anymore. I felt a fire starting in my chest. It was the slow-burning heat of a bass line building up to a crescendo. I turned away from the TV screens. I had work to do. I had to find a place with light. I had to read what Ruby left me. Because if I knew my wife, she hadn't just left me a letter, she had left me a weapon. The neon sign of Earl's Diner flickered with a buzzing sound that was almost in the key of B-flat. It was the only light on the block that felt welcoming. I had been coming to this place for 30 years. It was where Ruby and I used to eat pancakes at 2 in the morning after a long studio session. It was where we counted our tips when we were broke, and where we celebrated when we finally got our first big check. Now I was walking in alone, soaked to the bone, carrying a suitcase that held the only remnants of my life. The bell above the door chimed. The smell of frying bacon and stale coffee hit me. It smelled like home. The place was empty except for a trucker asleep in the back booth and Earl standing behind the counter. Earl was a giant of a man with hands like catcher's mitts and a heart just as big. He looked up from wiping down the counter. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Moses," he said, dropping his rag. "Good Lord, man. I saw the news. I saw what that girl did." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and slid into my usual booth. The red vinyl squeaked under my wetsuit. I felt heavy. The weight of the night was pressing down on my shoulders. Earl walked over with a pot of coffee and a menu. He didn't ask if I had money. He knew better. The usual mo, he asked softly. "Steak and eggs. On the house tonight. Do not argue with me." "Thank you, Earl," I whispered. My throat was tight. He poured the coffee steaming hot and black and walked away to the grill to give me privacy. He knew when a man needed silence. I took a sip of the coffee. The heat spread through my chest, thawing the ice around my heart. I looked at the leather suitcase sitting on the table opposite me. It looked out of place in the diner. It looked like a relic from another time. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out the envelope. The red wax seal was cracked down the middle from where I had touched it earlier. The paper was thick, cream-colored parchment. Ruby never used cheap paper. She said words had weight and they needed paper strong enough to carry them. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the contents. I expected a letter. I expected a goodbye note telling me how much she loved me and asking me to forgive Kesha. Ruby was always the forgiving one. She was the melody that smoothed out my rough rhythm. But there was no letter. Instead, I pulled out a stack of legal documents. They were bound with a blue ribbon. The top page was stamped with the seal of the state of Delaware. Certificate of Incorporation. I squinted in the dim light. I put on my reading glasses, which I had thankfully kept in my breast pocket. I read the name of the company. Red Velvet Limited Liability Company. I frowned. Red Velvet. That was the nickname I gave Ruby back in '75 because of her voice. It was smooth, rich, and sweet like the cake. But I didn't know she had a company. I thought she handled our finances through a joint checking account. I turned the page. Asset Schedule A. My eyes scanned the list and my breath caught in my throat. Item 1. Residential property located at 1500 Highland Drive. That was the mansion. The house I had just been thrown out of. Item 2. 2021 Ferrari 488 Spider. VIN ending in 5594. That was the car. The car Kesha was auctioning off right now. I read on. The list went on for 3 pages. It listed bank accounts, investment portfolios, copyright catalogs. I flipped to the next section. It was titled Intellectual Property Assignment. This is where the room started to spin. For years, the world knew Ruby as a housewife who supported her musician husband. But the music industry knew a legend named Red Velvet. She was a ghostwriter, a phantom. She wrote the hooks that sold millions of records. I looked at the list of songs owned by the LLC. Midnight Tears, Stay With Me, The Rhythm of Us. I gasped. I had played bass on those tracks. I remembered recording them in the studio with Luther and Whitney. I remembered Ruby sitting in the control room knitting a scarf, nodding her head. I thought she was just listening. I didn't know she had written the lyrics on a napkin the night before. I didn't know she owned the publishing rights. She had built an empire right under my nose. And she had done it quietly, without ego, without fame, just to secure our future. But why hide it? Why keep it a secret even from me? I turned to the final document. It was the operating agreement of the LLC. This was the contract. This was the law that governed the company. I read the clause regarding succession. Section 4. Death of primary member. Upon the death of Ruby Carter, also known as Red Velvet, The position of managing member shall not pass to heirs or descendants. I read that again. Not to heirs. That meant Kesha. Kesha inherited Ruby's personal effects, her clothes, her jewelry. But she did not inherit the company. The document continued. Control of Red Velvet LLC and all assets contained therein, including all real estate and intellectual property, shall immediately transfer to the appointed successor manager. My finger traced the line to the bottom of the page. There was a name typed there in bold capital letters. Moses Carter. I stared at my name. I wasn't just a beneficiary. I wasn't just a husband inheriting a house. I was the CEO. I flipped to the page regarding asset usage. Clause 12. Any occupancy of company property by non-members is subject to a lease agreement revocable at the discretion of the manager. My heart started to pound. It beat a heavy syncopated rhythm against my ribs. Kesha and Gavin didn't own the mansion. They were guests. They were squatters in corporate housing. Gavin didn't own the Ferrari. He was driving a company car. And because Ruby had set this up as a corporate entity, standard probate laws didn't apply. Kesha could wave her birth certificate around all she wanted. She could show the death certificate to every judge in the city. It didn't matter. The house didn't belong to Ruby Carter the person. It belonged to Red Velvet the corporation. And I was Red Velvet. I sat back in the booth. The squeak of the vinyl sounded different now. It didn't sound cheap. It sounded like a throne. Ruby had known. She had watched Kesha grow up. She had seen the greed in Gavin's eyes the first time he walked through our door. She knew they would come for the money the moment she was gone. She knew they would try to discard me like an old instrument string. So she built a fortress. And she gave me the only key. I looked out the window of the diner. The rain was still falling, washing the grime off the city streets. Somewhere in the hills, Kesha was probably drinking my champagne, celebrating her victory. She was probably laughing about the old man sleeping under a bridge. She didn't know that the bridge belonged to me, too. Earl came back to the table. He set down a steaming plate of steak and eggs. The smell was intoxicating. "Here you go, Mo," he said gently. "Eat up. You look like you have the weight of the world on you." I looked at Earl. I looked at the food. Then I looked at the documents spread out on the table. I picked up my fork. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. "Actually, Earl," I said, my voice deep and steady. The weight just got a lot lighter. I took a bite of the steak. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. It tasted like justice. Earl looked at the papers. "Good news?" he asked. "You could say that," I replied. I closed the folder. I didn't put it back in the suitcase. I kept it on the table right next to my coffee. "Earl, I need a favor," I said. "Anything, Mo. I need to borrow your phone. And I need the number for a towing company, the one that handles heavy-duty repossessions." Earl raised an eyebrow. "You got car trouble, Mo." "No," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "But someone else is about to." I looked at the reflection of myself in the dark window. I didn't see a homeless widower. I didn't see a washed-up bass player. I saw the manager. The game had changed. The tempo had shifted. Kesha wanted to play hardball. She wanted to talk about brands and assets and liquidity. Fine. Let's talk business. I finished my coffee and signaled Earl for the phone. It was time to make the first call. It was time to let the music stop for my daughter and start playing a new song for me, a song called Eviction. While I was sitting in a diner booth planning my resurrection, my son-in-law was busy planning my burial in my own living room. The mansion on Highland Drive had transformed overnight. It was no longer a home. It was a liquidation center. Gavin was pacing the marble floors of the foyer, wearing his sunglasses indoors and shouting into his phone. He looked like a man who was trying to outrun an avalanche. "Listen to me, Tony!" Gavin barked into his headset. "I do not care about the market value. I want a quick sale. I have 5 vehicles, 2 Ferraris, a vintage Porsche, the G-Wagon, and the Rolls. I want $5 million cash, today. No paper trails, no questions." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. His face twitched. "Crypto," Gavin said. "I want it in Bitcoin or Ethereum. Direct wallet transfer. I have an opportunity, Tony. A metaverse land deal that is going to 10 times in 48 hours. I need the liquidity now." Kesha was sitting on the stairs watching him. She was still wearing the red dress from the funeral, but it looked wrinkled now. The champagne flute in her hand was empty, but she kept holding it like a security blanket. She looked at the empty spot where my recliner used to be. For a split second, a shadow of doubt crossed her face. "Gavin," she said, her voice quiet. "Maybe we should wait. Dad loved those cars. Maybe we should just sell one." Gavin spun around. He took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed and manic. "We do not wait, Kesha," he snapped. "We strike. That is what winners do. Your father was a loser. He sat on millions of dollars of assets and did nothing. He drove that Ferrari once a week like a grandma. I am going to turn that metal into an empire." "But he just left," Kesha whispered. "It feels wrong, Gavin. He didn't even take a coat." "He is a survivor," Gavin said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "He has friends in the gutter. He belongs there. You said it yourself, babe. He was a burden, a dead weight dragging down the Ruby Carter brand. We cut the anchor. Now we sail." Kesha looked at him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that cruelty was actually strength. "You are right," she said, forcing a smile. "We are free." "Exactly," Gavin said. "Now get up, put on something hot. We are driving the Spider to the dealership. I am going to show these old money fools how new money does business." Half an hour later, the garage door opened. The Ferrari 488 Spider roared to life. It was a beautiful machine. Rosso Corsa red, tan leather interior. I had spent hours detailing it with a toothbrush. Gavin threw a half-eaten protein bar onto the passenger seat and revved the engine until it screamed in pain. Kesha climbed in. She put on big sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. "Let's ride," Gavin yelled. He peeled out of the driveway, leaving black tire marks on the pristine pavers Ruby had picked out. He drove fast. Too fast. He wove through traffic, cutting off minivans and honking at pedestrians. He treated the masterpiece of Italian engineering like a go-kart. They arrived at the exotic car dealership in downtown. It was a glass cathedral filled with Lamborghinis and McLarens. This wasn't the dealership where I bought the car. Gavin was too smart for that. He went to a competitor thinking they wouldn't ask questions. He parked the Ferrari right in front of the entrance, taking up 2 spaces. He stepped out, adjusting his jacket, trying to look like a billionaire. Kesha followed him, looking at her phone, avoiding eye contact with the world. A salesman approached them. He was slick, wearing a suit that cost more than Gavin's entire wardrobe. "Welcome to Prestige Exotics," the salesman said, eyeing the dirty Ferrari. "How can I help you folks today?" "I am not buying," Gavin said, slamming his hand on the roof of my car. "I am selling. This is a 2021 Spider, mint condition, low miles. I want to trade it for a wire transfer, today." The salesman looked at the car. He looked at the protein bar wrapper on the seat. He looked at Gavin. "We don't usually do same-day acquisitions, sir," the salesman said coolly. "We need to inspect the vehicle, run the history, check the title." "I have the title," Gavin lied. "It is at home, but the car is here. Run the VIN. It is clean. One owner, an old lady who barely drove it." He threw the key fob at the salesman. "Run it," Gavin commanded, "and give me a number that makes me smile." The salesman caught the keys. He didn't smile. "Let's go to my desk," he said. They sat in the plush leather chairs of the office. Gavin tapped his foot nervously. Kesha stared out the window at the car. She remembered the day Ruby gave it to me. She remembered how happy I looked. She pushed the memory down. The salesman typed the vehicle identification number into his computer. He hit enter. Gavin leaned forward. "How much?" 300,000, 350. The salesman stared at the screen. He frowned. He hit enter again. "What is the holdup?" Gavin asked, irritated. "The Wi-Fi's slow in here." The salesman turned the monitor away from them. His face had changed. The polite customer service smile was gone. It was replaced by the cold, hard look of a man who realizes he is dealing with a problem. "I am afraid I cannot buy this car, sir," the salesman said. "Why not?" Gavin demanded, standing up. "It is a Ferrari. You sell Ferraris." "Because I cannot buy a car that you do not own," the salesman said. "Excuse me?" Gavin laughed. "My wife here is the heir. Her mother died. She owns everything. It is probate law 101, buddy." The salesman stood up too. He crossed his arms. "Sir, the system has flagged this VIN. This vehicle is not registered to a Ruby Carter, and it is certainly not registered to a Kesha Carter." "Who is it registered to then?" Kesha asked, speaking for the first time. "It is registered to a corporate entity," the salesman said. "Red Velvet LLC." "So what?" Gavin shouted. "That is Ruby's company. Same thing." "No, sir, it is not," the salesman said. "The system shows an active alert placed on this asset exactly 1 hour ago. Status frozen. Reason, potential theft. Contact for release. Moses Carter, managing member. The room went silent. Moses Kesha whispered. My father locked the car. Gavin asked, his voice rising to a shriek. That is impossible. He is homeless. I threw him out. He doesn't even have a phone. The salesman reached for the phone on his desk. Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave, and I am legally required to report this attempted transaction to the asset holder. You are lying, Gavin screamed. He lunged for the computer. It is a glitch. Refresh the page. Security, the salesman said calmly into the phone. Two large men in black suits appeared at the doorway. Gavin looked at them. He looked at Kesha. He looked at the deal of a lifetime slipping through his fingers. Fine, he spat. Keep your lousy dealership. I will go somewhere else. I will go to the black market. He grabbed the keys from the desk. Come on, Kesha. They stormed out of the dealership. Gavin was shaking with rage. He got back into the car and slammed the door so hard the window rattled. He is doing this to spite me, Gavin yelled, hitting the steering wheel. The old man. He figured out the passwords. He is hacking us from a library computer or something. Kesha looked at him. She looked at the man she had chosen over her father. Gavin, she said softly, Dad doesn't know how to hack. He barely knows how to use Netflix. Then how do you explain this? Gavin roared, starting the engine. I don't know, Kesha said. But maybe we missed something. Shut up, Gavin snapped. Just shut up. I am calling my lawyer. He pulled out his phone and dialed. He peeled out of the parking lot, almost hitting a delivery truck. Hello, Saul? Gavin shouted into the phone. Yeah, it is me. We have a problem. The assets are frozen. The computer says Red Velvet LLC. Yeah, fix it. I don't care how. Just fix it. He hung up and threw the phone onto the dashboard. We are going to verify the other cars, Gavin said, his eyes wild. Maybe it is just the Ferrari. Maybe the Porsche is clean. He drove like a madman back toward the mansion. But deep down in the pit of his stomach, a cold stone of fear was forming. He was beginning to realize that the game of chess he thought he was winning had just been reset. And he wasn't playing against a senile old man anymore. He was playing against a ghost. And the ghost had just made its first move. The office of Benjamin Stein was not in a glass tower downtown. It was in a brownstone building that smelled of cigar smoke and old vinyl records. Stein had been Ruby's lawyer for 30 years. He was 75 years old, wore suspenders, and had eyes that had seen every contract trap in the music industry. He was a shark, but he was our shark. I walked in at 10 p.m. The secretary had gone home hours ago. Stein was sitting at his mahogany desk, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look at my wet clothes or my tired eyes. He just pushed a glass across the desk toward me. You are late, Mo Stein said, his voice like gravel. Ruby said you would be here by noon. I sat down. The leather chair groaned. I took a sip of the scotch. It burned going down, but it settled the shaking in my hands. They threw me out, Ben, I said. They didn't even wait for the flowers to wilt. I know, Stein said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file, a thick black file. Ruby knew too. She sat in that exact chair 6 months ago, Mo. She sat there and she cried. Not because she was dying, but because she knew her daughter was already dead inside. She told me about Gavin. She told me about the debts. She told me they were waiting for her to die like vultures waiting for a carcass. He opened the file. Inside were photos. Photos of Gavin meeting with loan sharks. Photos of Kesha signing credit card slips for things she couldn't afford. Ruby had been watching them. She had been protecting the estate from the inside. She left you the suitcase, Stein said. I nodded. I found the papers. The LLC. The copyrights. Good, Stein said. Then you know you are the CEO. You are the boss, Mo. You can walk in there right now with the police and throw them out on the street. You can have them arrested for trespassing. Just say the word, and I will have the sheriff at the gate in 20 minutes. I looked at the amber liquid in my glass. I thought about Kesha. I thought about the little girl who used to sit on my amp while I practiced scales. I thought about the woman who had just laughed while her husband threw my life into the rain. If I throw them out now, they will just play the victim, I said. They will go to the press. They will say the mean old father stole their inheritance. They won't learn anything, Ben. They will just find another host to leech off of. Stein leaned back. He smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. So you want to play the long game, he asked. I want to teach them the value of $1, I said. I want to strip away the costume. Gavin thinks he is a king because he drives my car. Kesha thinks she is a queen because she lives in my house. Take away the props and let's see who they really are. Stein tapped his finger on a document. Clause 14, he said. Revocation of commercial assets. The company provides vehicles and housing for employees. Since neither Gavin nor Kesha are employees of Red Velvet LLC, their use of company property is unauthorized. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number. It is Stein, he said into the receiver. Execute Order 66. Yes, the whole fleet. Tonight. Don't knock, just hook and book. He hung up. He looked at me. Go to the hotel, Mo Stein said. Get some sleep. By the time the sun comes up, the driveway will be empty, and the real show will begin. I didn't sleep. I went to the hotel, but I sat by the window watching the city clock tower. I counted the hours. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. At 3 a.m. on Highland Drive, the silence of the wealthy suburbs was broken. Not by sirens, but by the heavy industrial rumble of diesel engines. 5 flatbed tow trucks turned onto the street. They didn't use flashing lights. They were the repo men, the ghosts of the financial world. They moved with a terrifying efficiency. The gate code had been changed by Gavin, but that didn't matter. Stein had given the repo team the master override code Ruby had set up years ago. The iron gates swung open silently. The trucks rolled up the long driveway. They positioned themselves. Inside the house, Gavin and Kesha were asleep. They were probably dreaming of crypto millions and charity galas. They didn't hear the first truck back up to the Rolls-Royce parked in the circular drive. The repo man hooked the winch to the axle. He engaged the hydraulics. The heavy luxury car tilted upward. The tires left the pavement. One down. The second truck moved to the G-Wagon. Hook. Lift. Gone. The third truck went for the vintage Porsche. It was a surgical extraction. No alarms went off because the cars belonged to the company and the company had authorized the removal. The security system recognized the tow trucks as friendly. Then came the prize. The garage door opened. I had given Stein the remote code. The fourth truck backed up to the garage. Inside sat the Ferrari 488 Spider. My car. The car Gavin had redlined earlier that day. The car he had tried to sell. The driver jumped out. He put dollies under the rear wheels. He winched it out into the night air. The Rosso Corsa paint gleamed under the moonlight. It looked like a jewel being stolen back by the earth. That was when the noise finally woke them up. The bedroom light flicked on. I could imagine the scene. Gavin stumbling to the window, rubbing his eyes, looking out, seeing his empire being towed away on a convoy of flatbeds. The front door flew open. Gavin ran out in his silk boxers, screaming. "Hey," he yelled. "Hey, stop! That is my car! What are you doing? Thieves! Police! Help!" He ran toward the truck holding the Ferrari. He tried to grab the door handle of the truck, but it was locked. The driver didn't even look at him. He just shifted gears and began to roll down the driveway. Kesha ran out behind him, wrapped in a sheet. She was screaming too. "My Porsche," she shrieked. "Where are you taking my Porsche?" The lead driver, a man named Tiny, who was anything but, stopped his truck at the gate. He rolled down the window. Gavin pounded on the door. "I am calling the cops," Gavin screamed. "You are stealing $5 million of automobiles. I will have you buried under the jail." Tiny looked down at Gavin. He held up a clipboard. "No theft, sir," Tiny said, his voice bored. "Asset recovery. Red Velvet LLC has revoked the usage rights for these vehicles due to unauthorized possession." What Gavin stuttered. Unauthorized. "My wife owns the company." Tiny checked his clipboard. "Paperwork says the CEO is a Mr. Moses Carter," Tiny said. "And Mr. Carter says you are walking from now on." He handed Gavin a copy of the seizure order. Gavin tried to grab it, but the wind caught it. The paper blew away into the dark bushes. "Have a nice night," Tiny said. He rolled up the window. The convoy moved out. The gates closed automatically. Gavin and Kesha stood in the driveway, barefoot, shivering. The driveway that had been filled with millions of dollars of horsepower 5 minutes ago was now empty, just oil stains and tire marks. Kesha looked at the empty space where her Porsche used to be. She looked at Gavin. "He did this," she whispered. "My dad. He did this." Gavin didn't answer. He was staring at the closed gate. His face was pale. For the first time, the arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. "He took my car," Gavin whispered. "He actually took the Ferrari." Kesha started to cry. Not the fake tears for the camera, real scared tears. How are we going to get to the meeting tomorrow, she sobbed. How are we going to look rich without the cars, Gavin? We are influencers. We can't take an Uber. Gavin turned on her. Shut up, he snapped. Just shut up. This is a mistake. It is a legal maneuver. I will fix it. I will call Stein in the morning and sue him for emotional distress. But as they walked back into the house, the cold reality settled in. The house felt different. It felt hostile. The smart lights flickered as if they were laughing. Miles away in my hotel room, I watched the notification on my phone. Asset recovery complete. 5 units secure. I poured the rest of the scotch down the sink. I didn't need it anymore. I felt calm. I felt focused. The rhythm section had just taken control of the song. The flashy guitar solo was over. Now it was time for the bass line to rattle their bones. I picked up the phone and called Stein. They are gone, Stein said. Good, I said. Now phase 2. What is phase 2? Stein asked. I looked at the city skyline. They still have the house, I said. They still have the internet. They still have heat. They are too comfortable, Ben. So Stein asked. So cut it, I said. Cut it all. I want them to know what it feels like to be cold. The silence in the garage was louder than the engines had been. 5 empty parking spaces stared back at my daughter and her husband like missing teeth in a smile. The oil stains on the concrete were fresh gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, marking the spots where millions of dollars of net worth had sat just an hour ago. I wasn't there to see it with my own eyes, but I saw it clearly enough. I was sitting in Benjamin Stein's office 5 miles away. The office was dark, lit only by the glow of a large tablet screen propped up on the mahogany desk. I was sipping a cup of herbal tea, watching the security feed from the camera mounted in the corner of the garage. I watched Gavin, the tech genius, the visionary. He wasn't building the future, he was kicking a tire iron across the floor. It clattered against the wall, chipping the paint. You had one job, Kesha, Gavin screamed. His voice was tinny through the tablet speakers, but the venom was clear. One simple job. Transfer the titles. Sign the papers. How hard is it to put a pen to paper? Kesha was standing by the door, hugging herself. She was shivering, still wrapped in the bedsheet she had run out in. I tried, Gavin, she sobbed. I told the lawyer. He said it takes time. Time. Gavin roared. He spun around, pointing a finger in her face. We don't have time. I leveraged those cars, Kesha. I promised the investors liquidity by noon today. If I don't show proof of funds, the deal collapses. Do you understand what that means? It means we are broke. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't offer her a jacket. He blamed her. I watched my daughter flinch. I watched her shrink away from the man she had defended to me for 3 years. Dad, he is passionate, she used to tell me. Dad, he is just under a lot of pressure. Now I was seeing the pressure cook the man, and what was coming out wasn't passion. It was abuse. I took a sip of tea. My hand hovered over the tablet screen. Stein looked over my shoulder. You want to call the police, Mo? He asked. Not yet, I said. If I call the police now, she will defend him. She will say it was a lover's quarrel. She needs to see him when the lights go out. She needs to see who he is in the dark. I minimized the camera feed and opened the Smart Home Master Control app. Ruby loved technology. She had the whole house wired. Everything from the thermostat to the pool filter was connected to a central server. And the administrator password was her birthday, not Kesha's birthday, mine. I looked at the dashboard. Status online. Internet gigabit fiber. Active. Climate control 72 degrees. Pool heater 85 degrees. They were comfortable. They were warm. They were connected to the world that validated them. Gavin needs to cool off, I whispered. I tapped the climate control icon. I swiped the dial down. 60 degrees, then 55. Then I tapped the lock controls button. Then I went to the pool heater. Kesha loved that pool. She spent hours floating in it, taking selfies, pretending she was a mermaid. It cost $2,000 a month just to keep it heated. I tapped off. Then I looked at the internet connection. This was the lifeline. For Kesha, the internet was more important than water. It was her mirror. It was her audience. Without it, she was just a girl in an empty house. I watched the screen. Kesha had walked into the kitchen. She was holding her phone up. She was composing herself. She wiped her eyes. She fixed her hair. She was about to go live. She was about to tell her followers about the tragic theft of her cars, spinning the narrative to make herself the victim. She hit the record button. "Hey guys," she said to the phone, putting on her sad voice. "I am literally shaking right now. You won't believe what just happened. My dad—" I tapped the disable button on the router settings. On the security feed, I saw Kesha freeze. She tapped her phone screen. She frowned. She walked around the kitchen island, holding the phone up, looking for a signal. "What the hell?" she muttered. Gavin walked in. He was shivering now. "Is it cold in here?" he asked. "Why is the AC blowing?" "It is freezing. The Wi-Fi is down," Kesha said, panic rising in her voice. "I can't stream. I can't post the update." Gavin fixed the router. "I don't know how to fix the router," Gavin snapped. "I am a crypto trader, not an IT guy. Just use your data." "I can't," Kesha cried. "The reception in these hills is terrible. I need the Wi-Fi. My fans are waiting. They need to know." "Who cares about your fans?" Gavin yelled. He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and slammed the door. "We need money. We need to order an Uber to get to the bank." I watched them on the screen. The temperature in the house was dropping. The silence of the disconnected router was driving them crazy. "Order a black car," Gavin commanded. "Use the Amex. We need to get downtown before the market opens." Kesha opened the Uber app on her phone, relying on the weak cellular signal. "Okay," she said. "It is searching." She waited. "Okay, I got one. It is $50. "Book it," Gavin said. I saw Kesha tap the screen. Then she paused. She tapped it again. "It says payment declined," she said. "Try the Visa," Gavin said, rubbing his arms against the cold draft coming from the vents. Kesha tapped again. "Declined." "Try the MasterCard," Gavin shouted. "What is wrong with you?" "I am trying," Kesha yelled back. "It is declining everything." I sat in the office 5 miles away watching the chaos. I had called the bank 20 minutes ago. As the executor of the Red Velvet LLC, I had flagged all suspicious activity. Since the cards were issued under the company account for expenses, and since Kesha was no longer an authorized officer, the freeze was immediate. "Call the bank," Gavin hissed. "Put it on speaker." Kesha dialed. She paced the kitchen floor. Her bare feet must have been freezing on the cold tile. "Welcome to Chase Private Client," the automated voice said. "Please hold for a representative." They waited. The hold music played. It was a cheerful jazz tune. I wondered if I had played bass on that track too. It sounded familiar. Finally, a human voice came on the line. "Ms. Carter, this is fraud protection. How can I help you?" "My cards aren't working," Kesha said, her voice trembling. "I am trying to get a car. I need to get to the city. Why are you declining my transactions?" "One moment, let me check the account status." The sound of typing echoed through the speakerphone. "Ms. Carter, I see here that the primary account holder placed a stop order on all secondary cards this morning at 4 a.m. "Primary account holder," Kesha asked. "That is my mother. My mother is dead." "I show the primary account holder as the Red Velvet Corporation," the representative said, "and the authorized administrator, Mr. Moses Carter, has flagged these cards as lost or stolen." Kesha dropped the phone on the counter. It landed with a crack. "Moses," she whispered. Gavin stared at the phone. His face went purple. "He cut us off," Gavin said. "The old man cut us off." "He can't do that," Kesha screamed at the phone. "I am his daughter. I have rights. Turn them back on. I demand you turn them back on." "I am sorry, ma'am," the representative said, her voice cold and professional. "You are listed as an authorized user, not an owner. We cannot reactivate the cards without Mr. Carter's verbal confirmation and a secure PIN code. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Kesha hung up. She looked at Gavin. "We have no cars," she said. "We have no internet. We have no money." "And it is freezing in here," Gavin added, his teeth chattering. He walked over to the thermostat. He mashed the buttons. Nothing happened. The screen displayed a small lock icon and the words, "System override. Administrator access only." "He is watching us," Gavin whispered. He looked around the room, scanning the ceiling. "He is watching us right now." He picked up a vase from the counter and threw it at the security camera in the corner. The feed on my tablet went black. I sipped my tea. "You missed a spot, Gavin," I said to the blank screen. I switched the feed to the hallway camera. I could still see them. Gavin was storming out of the kitchen. "This is your fault," he screamed at Kesha. "You let him keep the power. You were supposed to handle the estate. You are useless." He grabbed his jacket. "Where are you going?" Kesha cried. "I am walking," Gavin said. "I am walking to the highway." I am going to find a signal and I am going to call a real lawyer. Not your mother's ancient history attorney. He didn't wait for her. He walked out the front door, leaving it wide open. The cold wind blew into the foyer, scattering the mail on the table. Kesha stood alone in the kitchen. She looked at her phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no money. She hugged herself tight. She looked at the refrigerator. It was full of expensive food she didn't know how to cook. She looked at the espresso machine she didn't know how to operate without the smart app. She slid down to the floor, leaning against the cold cabinets. "Daddy," she whispered, "stop it. Please." I watched her for a moment. My finger hovered over the thermostat control. I could turn the heat back up. I could give her that small comfort. But then I remembered the trash bag she threw at my feet. I remembered the motel she tried to send me to. The cold is a teacher, Kesha. It teaches you to appreciate the fire. And you haven't been cold long enough to learn anything yet. I closed the app. I put the tablet in my bag. Stein watched me. "Phase 2 complete," he asked. "Phase 2 complete," I said. "What is Phase 3, Mo?" I stood up and buttoned my jacket. "Phase 3 is hunger," I said. "They can't eat the furniture. And pretty soon they are going to realize that pride doesn't taste very good either." I walked out of the office. The sun was coming up over the city. It was going to be a beautiful day for me. But for the Carter mansion, winter had just arrived. Hunger changes the acoustics of a room. When you are full, a large house feels grand and spacious. When you are starving and cold, that same space feels like a cavern. It echoes with your own failures. It amplifies the sound of your stomach growling. By noon the next day, the mansion on Highland Drive had become a prison of ice and silence. The heating was still off. The internet was still dead. And the refrigerator, which used to be stocked with truffles and imported cheese, was now empty, save for a bottle of flat sparkling water and a jar of artisanal mustard. You cannot survive on mustard. I wasn't there to see it, but I know the rhythm of desperation. I know how the melody falls apart when the drummer quits. Kesha and Gavin were pacing the living room floor wearing their winter coats indoors. Gavin was looking at his phone, which had 5% battery left. He was trying to find a signal, trying to find a lifeline. Kesha was sitting on the floor, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, shivering not just from the cold, but from the withdrawal of digital validation. She hadn't posted in 12 hours. For an influencer, that is the equivalent of clinical death. "We need cash," Gavin said. His voice was raspy. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night pacing, cursing my name, and trying to hack the smart lock on the thermostat. "We need cash right now, Kesha." Kesha looked up. Her eyes were dull. "I told you, Gavin," she whispered. "The cards are frozen. The bank accounts are locked. Dad shut it all down. We have nothing. We have you," Gavin said. He stopped pacing. He looked at her with a look that made her pull the blanket tighter. "You are a Carter. Your last name still opens doors even if the plastic doesn't work." "What do you mean?" Kesha asked. "There is a guy downtown," Gavin said. "A lender. He doesn't check credit scores. He checks collateral. He checks reputation. If you walk in there and tell him who your mother was, he will front us 10 grand. Easy." Kesha stiffened. She knew the kind of lenders Gavin was talking about. They were the kind who operated out of the back of pawn shops. The kind who took jewelry as a deposit and fingers as a penalty. "No," Kesha said, shaking her head. "No, Gavin. I am not doing that. That is dangerous. Dangerous." Gavin laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "Dangerous is losing our position. Dangerous is me missing this crypto launch because my wife is too proud to sign a paper. You are going to go there, Kesha. You are going to sign the loan, and you are going to give me the cash." "I won't do it," Kesha said. Her voice was trembling, but there was a hint of steel in it, the first sign of resistance she had shown in years. "I am not going to a loan shark, Gavin. We should just call my dad. We should apologize. Maybe if we beg, he will turn the heat back on." "Apologize!" Gavin roared. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He loomed over her. He looked like a stranger. The charming tech entrepreneur she had married was gone. In his place was a desperate addict looking for a fix. "You want to beg that old man," Gavin shouted. "The man who stole my cars. The man who humiliated us. You are weak, Kesha. You are pathetic. You are just like him." He grabbed her arm. He tried to pull her up. "Get up," Gavin snarled. "You are going to the lender." "Let go of me!" Kesha screamed. She tried to pull away. She scratched his hand. That was the moment the music stopped completely. Gavin pulled his hand back. He didn't hesitate. He didn't think. He swung. The slap echoed through the cold, empty living room. It was a sickening sound. Flesh hitting flesh. Kesha fell back against the sofa. She held her cheek. She looked at Gavin with wide, terrified eyes. She had never been hit before. Not by me. Not by Ruby. She had grown up in a house where love was the only currency. "You hit me," she whispered. Her voice broke. Gavin stood over her. He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't sorry. He looked at his hand, then he looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. "You think I wanted to do that?" Gavin spat. "You made me do that. You are useless, Kesha. Without your mother's money, you are nothing." Kesha stared at him. The tears started to well up hot and fast. "But you love me," she stammered. "You said we were partners. You said I was your muse." Gavin laughed. He leaned down, getting right in her face. "I love the portfolio, Kesha. I love the access. I love the black card. Did you really think I loved you? Look at you. You are shallow. You are vain. You have no skills. You have no talent. You were just the key to the vault. And now that the vault is locked and the old lady is dead, you are just a broken key. And do you know what we do with broken keys, Kesha? We throw them away." The words hit her harder than the slap. He didn't love her. He had never loved her. It was a transaction, a long con. And she had been the mark. Kesha scrambled backward. She pushed herself up from the floor. She couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt toxic. She needed to get out. She needed to run. She turned and sprinted toward the door. "Where are you going?" Gavin yelled after her. "You can't run anywhere. You have nowhere to go." Kesha ignored him. She ran through the foyer. She ran past the empty spot where the antique vase used to be. She burst through the door into the garage. Her hand reached out automatically for the wall where the keys usually hung. Her fingers grasped at empty air. The hooks were bare. She stopped. She looked at the garage. It was a cavern of concrete. The Ferrari was gone. The Porsche was gone. The G-Wagon was gone. There was nothing but oil stains and dust. She stood there panting. Her cheek was throbbing where he had hit her. She looked at the empty space where my car used to sit. And in the silence of that empty garage, she heard a voice. It wasn't Gavin's voice. It wasn't her own. It was mine. It was a memory from 5 years ago. The day she brought Gavin home to meet us. We were sitting on the back porch. I was restringing my bass. She was talking about how smart Gavin was, how he was going to change the world. "Baby girl," I had said, looking her in the eye. "Watch how he treats the waiter. Watch how he treats the valet." A man who thinks he is better than the person serving him is a man who is hollow inside. "Oh, Dad, you are just old-fashioned," she had said, rolling her eyes. Maybe I had said. But listen to the rhythm, Kesha. He is rushing the tempo. He wants the applause before he plays the song. He loves the lifestyle. He loves the wallet. But I don't see him looking at you when you aren't looking at him. Be careful. She had laughed at me then. She had told me I was jealous. She had told me I didn't understand modern love. Now, standing in the cold garage with a bruise forming on her face, she understood. Moses was right. The old bass player was right. She slid down the wall until she hit the concrete floor. She pulled her knees to her chest. She buried her face in her arms and she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of rage. She cried for 10 minutes. She cried for the car. She cried for her mother. She cried for the wasted years. But then the tears stopped. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat. She touched her cheek. It was tender. She wasn't sorry yet. Not fully. The ego is a hard thing to break. She didn't think I was wrong. She thought, how dare they? She stood up. Her eyes were red, but they were dry. "This is Dad's fault," she whispered to the empty room. The logic was twisted, but it was the only logic she had left. If Dad hadn't taken the cars, Gavin wouldn't have snapped. If Dad hadn't turned off the heat, Gavin wouldn't have hit me. Dad is doing this. Dad is punishing me. He is ruining my marriage. She clenched her fists. "He thinks this is funny," she hissed. "He thinks he can teach me a lesson. He thinks he can humiliate me and I will just crawl back." She looked at the garage door. "I am not crawling," she said. She turned and walked back into the house. She didn't look at Gavin, who was back on the couch trying to text on his dying phone. She walked straight to the mudroom. She grabbed a pair of walking shoes. She grabbed her coat. "Where are you going?" Gavin asked, not even looking up. "To find him," Kesha said. Her voice was cold. "Good," Gavin muttered. "Tell him I am suing him. Tell him he is dead." "I am going to tell him exactly what I think of him," Kesha said. She walked out the front door. She didn't have a car. She didn't have an Uber. She started walking. She walked down the long driveway past the closed gates. She walked onto the main road. The wind whipped her hair. It was 5 miles to the city center. 5 miles to where the thurible signal of her father's betrayal was waiting. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't know I had the papers. She just knew she was hurt, and she wanted to hurt someone back. She marched down the road fueled by the toxic mixture of victimization and adrenaline. She was going to find Moses Carter. She was going to find him in whatever gutter he was sleeping in, and she was going to scream until he gave her back her life. She didn't know that she wasn't walking toward a fight. She was walking toward a mirror, and she wasn't ready for what she was about to see. Desperation has a specific taste. It tastes like copper pennies and stale gum. Kesha tasted it as she sat in the waiting room of a private investigator named Ray inside a strip mall next to a laundromat. She had pawned her diamond stud earrings, the only piece of jewelry she had on her, when she stormed out of the house to pay for his retainer. She sat there tapping her foot. Her nails chipped, her designer coat stained with mud from her long walk. She was waiting for Ray to tell her where her father was sleeping. She had a picture in her head. She imagined Moses curled up on a cot in a homeless shelter, or maybe shivering in a Motel 6 off the interstate. She needed that image. She needed him to be pathetic so she could justify her rage. She needed him to be the villain who had stolen her life, but failed to keep it. Gavin paced the small room. He had caught up to her an hour ago, not to apologize for hitting her, but because he realized she was his only link to the money. He was manic, his eyes darting around the room. "We are going to find him," Gavin muttered. "And when we do, I am going to shake him down. He has the passwords, Kesha. He hacked the accounts. That is a federal crime. We are going to threaten him with jail time until he unlocks the crypto wallet." The door opened. Ray walked in. He was a heavy man with a stained tie and eyes that had seen too much bad luck. He tossed a manila folder onto the cheap plastic table. "I found him," Ray said, lighting a cigarette. "Where is he?" Kesha asked, standing up. "Is he at the shelter on 5th? Is he sleeping in the park?" Ray laughed, a dry, hacking cough of a laugh. "Lady, your dad isn't sleeping in a park. He is living better than I am. Better than you are by the looks of it." "What do you mean?" Gavin asked, stepping forward. "He is at the Ritz-Carlton," Ray said. "The one downtown. He checked in yesterday. Presidential suite. Top floor." The room went silent. The hum of the neon sign outside seemed to get louder. The Ritz, Kesha whispered. "That is impossible. He doesn't have any money." I cut his cards. "Well, he is paying with something," Ray said. "Maybe he is washing dishes." But the concierge said Mr. Moses Carter is a VIP guest. Do not disturb status. Gavin's face turned a deep shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulged. "He stole it," Gavin screamed. "He stole the liquid cash from the safe." "I told you, Kesha. He emptied the emergency fund. He is spending our inheritance on room service and fluffing pillows. That is my money. That is my suite." Kesha felt the rage boil over. It mixed with the shame and the cold, and it created a fire that consumed her rationality. Her father was living in luxury while she was freezing in an empty mansion without Wi-Fi. He was laughing at her. He was mocking her suffering. "Let's go," Kesha said, grabbing her purse. "Where?" Gavin asked. "To the Ritz," she said. "We are going to drag him out of there. We are going to expose him." They drove Gavin's old beat-up sedan, which he had kept at a friend's house as a backup. It smelled of mildew and fast food. They tore through the city streets fueled by entitlement and fury. They didn't look like the power couple of Instagram anymore. They looked like predators. They looked like junkies looking for a fix. They pulled up to the Ritz-Carlton. The valet looked at their rusted car with disdain, but Gavin threw the keys at him and marched toward the revolving doors. Kesha followed him. She tried to smooth her hair. She tried to look like the heiress she thought she was, but her eyes were wild. They stormed through the lobby. The marble floors gleamed. The air smelled of fresh lilies and expensive perfume. It was the smell of the life Kesha believed was her birthright. They ignored the receptionist. They went straight to the elevators. "Penthouse," Gavin said, pressing the button repeatedly. When the doors opened on the top floor, they didn't find a room. They found a private dining salon. The doors opened directly into a space of mahogany walls and crystal chandeliers. And there he was, Moses Carter. He wasn't wearing his old cardigan. He was wearing a bespoke tuxedo. He looked regal. He looked powerful. He was sitting at the head of a long table covered in white linen, but he wasn't alone. To his right sat Benjamin Stein, the lawyer. To his left sat three men Kesha recognized from magazines. One was the head of Universal Music. Another was a legendary producer from the 90s. These were the titans of the industry, men who didn't take meetings with influencers. They were laughing. They were toasting with glasses of dark red wine. They were listening to Moses tell a story. Kesha stopped dead in her tracks. The cognitive dissonance was deafening. This was her father, the man she called a burden. The man she thought was just a backup player. And here he was holding court with kings. Gavin didn't care about the kings. He only saw the thief. "There he is," Gavin shouted. The laughter at the table stopped. All heads turned toward the elevator. Gavin and Kesha stood there looking ragged and unhinged against the backdrop of elegance. "You old fraud," Kesha screamed. She marched into the room, her heels clicking aggressively on the parquet floor. Kesha, Moses said calmly. He didn't stand up, he didn't look afraid. He placed his wineglass down gently. "Don't you Kesha me," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at him. "You stole it. You stole Mom's money. You are staying in a $5,000 a night suite while your daughter is starving in the dark. How dare you?" She reached the table. She grabbed the edge of the tablecloth, shaking the crystal glasses. "You are senile," Kesha spat. "You are a confused old man who thinks he is somebody. You are spending my inheritance on these parasites." She gestured to the music executives. The head of Universal raised an eyebrow, looking at her like she was a bug on his windshield. Gavin rushed up behind her, panting. "Give me the passwords, Mo," Gavin demanded. "Give me the crypto keys. I know you have them. I will call the cops. I will tell them you embezzled the estate." The room was deadly silent. The only sound was Gavin's heavy breathing. Moses looked at them. He looked at his daughter. He saw the bruise on her cheek where Gavin had hit her. His eyes tightened for a fraction of a second, but he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just picked up his napkin and dabbed his mouth. "Say something," Kesha shrieked. "Defend yourself. Tell them you are just a session player. Tell them you are nobody without my mother." Moses remained silent. He knew that in a composition, silence is just as important as the notes. He let her scream. He let her expose her own ugliness to the room. Then Benjamin Stein stood up. The old lawyer adjusted his tie. He didn't look like a shark now. He looked like an executioner. "Ms. Carter," Stein said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Mr. Smith, you are interrupting a board meeting." "Board meeting?" Gavin laughed. "A board meeting for what?" "The retirement home committee." Stein didn't smile. "This is the quarterly meeting of the board of directors for Red Velvet, LLC, Stein said. And you are currently trespassing on private property paid for by the corporation." Kesha froze. "Red Velvet," she whispered. "That is Mom's nickname." "Yes," Stein said. "And the gentleman sitting at the head of this table is not just a session player. He is the chairman of the board. He is the sole owner of the intellectual property catalog that generated $40 million in royalties last year. He is the managing member of the entity that owns the house you are currently squatting in." Kesha felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Moses. "Chairman, $40 million. But Dad," Kesha stammered. "Dad, you just played bass. You just stood in the back." Moses finally spoke. His voice was deep, resonant, and filled with a power she had never heard before. "I stood in the back because I wanted to watch the show," Kesha, Moses said. "I stood in the back to protect the lead singer, but make no mistake, the bass line drives the song. The bass line holds the foundation, and when the bass line stops, the music falls apart." He looked at Gavin. "You called me a burden," Moses said. "You called me a dead weight. Well, Mr. Smith, the burden has been lifted, and now you are seeing what the stage looks like when the lights are turned on." Gavin looked at the music executives. They weren't looking at him with pity. They were looking at him with amusement. They knew who Moses was. They respected the silence. They respected the work. Gavin realized in that moment that he was the smallest man in the room. "But he is my father," Kesha cried, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, please. Gavin hit me. We are broke. We are hungry." Moses looked at the bruise again. "I know," Moses said softly, "and that is why you are going to leave." "Leave?" Kesha asked. "You need to learn how to stand, Kesha. You have been leaning on me and your mother for 30 years. You are soft. You are weak. And as long as I give you money, you will stay weak. He turned to Stein. "Have security remove them," Moses said, "and Ben cancel their room service access at the mansion. I don't want them getting comfortable." "What?" Kesha screamed. "Dad, no. You can't do this," Security Stein called out. Two massive men in black suits emerged from the shadows of the hallway. They didn't ask nicely. They grabbed Gavin by the arms. They grabbed Kesha by the elbow. "Let go of me!" Gavin shouted, kicking and flailing. "Do you know who I am? I am a visionary. You are a trespasser," the guard said, dragging him toward the elevator. Kesha looked back at her father as she was hauled away. Moses had picked up his wine glass again. He was listening to the producer next to him. He had turned his back. "Dad," Kesha wailed. "Daddy, look at me." The elevator doors closed, cutting off her scream. Inside the quiet dining room, Moses took a sip of wine. His hand trembled slightly, just once, then he steadied it. "I am sorry, gentlemen," Moses said to his guests. "Just a minor technical difficulty." "Where were we?" "We were talking about the legacy," the producer said respectfully. "Yes," Moses said, looking at the closed elevator doors. "The legacy. It is a hard thing to build. Sometimes you have to tear down the old structure before you can pour the new concrete." He looked at the empty chair where his daughter should have been sitting if she had been worthy. "Let's order dessert," Moses said. But his eyes were not smiling. His eyes were mourning the daughter he had to break in order to fix. The revolving doors of the Ritz-Carlton spun us out onto the sidewalk like chewed-up gum. One minute we were standing on marble floors, breathing air that smelled of orchids and money. The next minute we were standing on the concrete, breathing exhaust fumes and the smell of impending rain. The doorman looked at us. He looked at Gavin's disheveled suit and Kesha's tear-stained face. He didn't offer to hail a cab. He just crossed his arms and looked at the horizon. Kesha stood shivering in her thin coat. She looked up at the golden windows of the penthouse suite. She looked like a child who had just been told that Santa Claus was real, but he hated her. $40 million, Kesha whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the traffic. "Did you hear him, Gavin? He said the catalog makes $40 million a year." Gavin didn't answer immediately. He was pacing the sidewalk, chewing on his thumbnail until it bled. His eyes were darting back and forth, calculating, processing, reformatting his reality. "He lied," Gavin muttered. "He lied to us for years. He played the humble musician. He played the grieving widower, but he was sitting on a gold mine. He was the CEO. Gavin stopped pacing. He grabbed Kesha by the shoulders. His grip was too tight. "Think, Kesha," he hissed. "Think back. The suitcase. The old leather suitcase he was carrying. The one I threw out in the rain." Kesha blinked, confusing, clouding her eyes. "What about it?" she asked. "It was just junk. Old papers." "No," Gavin said, his eyes wide and manic. "It wasn't junk. Did you see how he held it? Did you see how he looked at it when I kicked it? He didn't care about the clothes. He didn't care about the house. He cared about that bag." Gavin let go of her and started pacing again. "The lawyer said intellectual property," Gavin muttered to himself. "He said copyrights. You don't keep copyrights in a bank vault, Kesha. You keep them on paper. You keep them on tapes." Up in the penthouse suite, the dinner was over. The executives had left, shaking Moses' hand with the reverence due a king. Moses was alone now. He walked to the window, looking down at the city streets where his daughter was standing. He couldn't see her from this height, but he knew she was there. He felt her presence like a bad note in a perfect chord. He turned away from the window and walked to the sideboard. The leather suitcase was sitting there. It was dry now, but the leather was stained from the rain. Moses ran his hand over the stickers. Paris, 1992. Tokyo, 1995. He opened the latches. Click, click. He bypassed the legal documents. He bypassed the ledgers. He reached for the bottom compartment. He pulled out a small plastic case holding 3 cassette tapes. They were old TDK 90-minute tapes, the kind you used to buy at the corner store for $1. Moses picked one up. On the label in red marker it said Kitchen Sessions Volume 1. He walked over to the high-end stereo system in the suite. It had a tape deck, a rare feature for a modern hotel, but Moses had requested it. He inserted the tape. He pressed play. A hiss of static filled the room, then the sound of a chair scraping against a linoleum floor, and then a voice. "Okay, Mo, are you recording?" It was Ruby. Her voice was young, vibrant, full of laughter. "I am rolling baby Moses' voice on the tape said. Give me that melody again. It goes like this," Ruby said. And then she started to hum. It was the melody to Midnight Train, the song that would eventually sell 10 million copies for a pop star named Celine. But on this tape it wasn't polished. It was raw. It was soulful. It was just Ruby and the rhythm of her tapping foot. And then Moses joined in, his deep baritone weaving under her soprano harmonizing, supporting, lifting her up. "I write the pain," Ruby said on the tape, stopping the song, "but I can't sell it. I can't go out there and be a star. I am too shy. Ooh, I just want to bake cakes and love you." "Then don't be a star," Moses said. "Let me be the shield. I will put my name on the paperwork. I will stand in front of the cameras when they ask who owns it. But you own the soul, Ruby. You are red velvet. Promise me," Ruby whispered. "Promise me we keep it ours. Just us and the music." "I promise," Moses said. Moses pressed stop. The room fell silent again. This tape was the smoking gun. In the world of music law, possession of the original master recording is 9/10 of the law. These tapes proved that Moses wasn't just an heir, he was a co-creator, he was the producer, he was the other half of the heartbeat. As long as he held these tapes, no court in the world could take the company away from him. They were the crown jewels. He ejected the tape and put it back in the case. He locked the suitcase. He didn't put it in the hotel safe, he put it under his pillow. Old habits die hard. You sleep with your instrument. You sleep with your value. Down on the street, Gavin stopped pacing. He looked up at the penthouse window. A slow, dark smile spread across his face. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a predator who has just found the weakness in the prey's armor. "The tapes," he whispered. "What?" Kesha asked, rubbing her arms against the cold. "The tapes," Gavin said louder. "Every songwriter has master tapes, Kesha. Original demos. If your dad is the CEO, it is because he holds the masters. That is the proof. That is the leverage." He looked at Kesha. He looked at her shivering form. He looked at her useless designer shoes. "If I get that suitcase," Gavin said, "I get the company, or at least I get enough leverage to force him to settle. I can threaten to leak them. I can threaten to destroy them. He loves those tapes more than he loves us." "We can't steal them," Kesha said, horrified. "That is a felony." "We are already criminals in his eyes," Gavin snapped. "He threw us out. He humiliated us. We are taking back what is ours." He looked at the valet stand. He looked at the service entrance around the corner. "I need to get in there," Gavin said. "I need to get into that room while he is sleeping." He turned to Kesha. "Give me your phone," he demanded. "Why?" Kesha asked, clutching her purse. "Because mine is dead," Gavin lied. "And I need to call a guy, a locksmith." Kesha handed him her phone. It was the last valuable thing she owned. Gavin took it. He didn't call a locksmith. He put it in his pocket. "Wait here," he said. "Where are you going?" Kesha asked, panic rising in her voice. "I am going to scout the perimeter," Gavin said. "I need to find a way in. Just wait here. Do not move. If the cops come, tell them you are waiting for an Uber." "But Gavin," Kesha cried, reaching for him. "It is cold. Don't leave me." "I have to do this for us, babe," Gavin said. He kissed her on the forehead. It was a cold, dry kiss. "Trust me. I will be back in 10 minutes. He turned and walked away. He walked toward the alley that ran alongside the hotel. He walked fast. Kesha watched him go. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself. She stood under the awning trying to stay out of the drizzle. 10 minutes passed. Then 20, then an hour. Gavin didn't come back. Kesha looked around. The doorman was staring at her with pity. A police car cruised slowly by. She felt small. She felt exposed. She didn't know that Gavin wasn't scouting the perimeter. He wasn't looking for a way in for both of them. He was looking for a way in for himself. Gavin had walked around the block and entered the hotel through the kitchen loading dock, slipping in behind a catering truck. He wasn't thinking about Kesha. He wasn't thinking about their marriage. He was thinking about $40 million. He was thinking that if he had that suitcase, he wouldn't need a wife. He wouldn't need a father-in-law. He would be the king. Kesha stood alone on the corner. The rain began to fall harder, mixing with the tears on her face. She realized with a sick feeling in her stomach that she was holding an empty purse on an empty street, waiting for a man who had already moved on to his next target. Up in the penthouse, Moses turned off the light. He lay in the darkness, his hand resting on the suitcase under his pillow. He listened to the city. He heard the sirens. He heard the wind. And he heard the faint, almost imperceptible sound of a service elevator dinging on the floor below. The bass player's ear is always tuned to the rhythm, and Moses knew the rhythm of trouble. He opened his eyes in the dark. He didn't reach for the phone. He reached for the heavy brass lamp on the nightstand. "Come on, Gavin," he whispered to the shadows. "Come and get it." The service hallway of the Ritz-Carlton smelled of industrial cleaner and expensive room service leftovers. It was 2 a.m. The guests were asleep in their 1,000 thread count sheets, but Gavin Smith was wide awake. He was sweating, a cold, clammy sweat that made his dress shirt stick to his back. He stood near the service elevator counting the seconds. He wasn't wearing his sunglasses anymore. His eyes were wide, darting around like a trapped animal. He had been waiting for 40 minutes. Finally, the heavy gray door opened. A housekeeping attendant pushed a cart out. She was young, tired, and looked startled to see a man in a disheveled suit standing there. Gavin stepped forward. He didn't have cash. Kesha had $50, but he had left her on the street corner hours ago. He had something else. He unclasped the Rolex Submariner from his wrist. It was a wedding gift from Ruby. It was worth $15,000. "Here," Gavin whispered, shoving the watch at the maid. "Take it. It is real. Look at the movement." The maid recoiled, clutching her cart. "Sir, you cannot be here," she said. "I lost my key," Gavin lied, his voice shaking. "My father-in-law is in the presidential suite. He is sick. I need to get his medicine, but I don't want to wake him up by knocking. Just swipe the card. Just swipe it and the watch is yours." The maid looked at the watch. It glinted under the fluorescent lights. She looked at Gavin's desperate face. She made a calculation. She took the watch. She didn't ask questions. She walked to the double doors at the end of the hall, the ones with the gold number 1 on them. She swiped her master key card. The lock clicked green. "Thank you." Gavin breathed. He slipped inside before the light turned red again. The suite was massive. It was bigger than his first apartment. The foyer was dark, lit only by the ambient city light filtering in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The air was cool and smelled of lavender. Gavin took off his shoes. He moved silently across the plush carpet. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the heist. The move that would save his empire. He wasn't a thief in his own mind. He was a liberator. He was taking back the assets that the old man had stolen. He crept into the living area. He saw the outline of the grand piano. He saw the silhouettes of the expensive furniture. And there on the sideboard, right where he hoped it would be, sat the leather suitcase. It was sitting there like a trophy. Gavin's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked toward the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar. He could hear the sound of deep, rhythmic breathing. The old man was asleep. The old man was dreaming of his glory days while his son-in-law was stealing his future. Gavin crept to the sideboard. He reached out. His fingers touched the worn leather handle. It felt cold. He lifted it. It was heavy. "Gotcha," Gavin whispered. He could have turned and ran. He could have taken the suitcase and sprinted for the service elevator. But greed is a heavy anchor. He needed to be sure. He needed to see the tapes. He needed to hold the masters in his hand to feel the victory. He set the suitcase down on the dining table. He knelt on the floor. He fumbled with the latches. They were stiff. Click. The sound seemed deafening in the quiet room. Gavin froze. He looked at the bedroom door. The breathing continued, uninterrupted. Click. The second latch opened. Gavin lifted the lid. He pulled out his phone using the screen as a flashlight. He shone the light into the suitcase, expecting to see rows of cassette tapes, expecting to see the millions of dollars in intellectual property. The suitcase was empty. No, not empty. There was a single sheet of hotel stationery taped to the bottom, and next to it a small black box with a blinking red light. Gavin frowned. He leaned closer. The red light blinked. Beep, beep, beep. It was a GPS tracker, an Apple AirTag. Gavin's stomach dropped. He looked at the paper. In the harsh blue light of his phone screen, he read the handwritten note. It wasn't Ruby's handwriting. It was Moses's. Block letters, sharp and precise. "Hello, Gavin. You have just crossed the line from a civil dispute to a federal crime. Smile. You are on camera." Gavin dropped the phone. It clattered onto the table. He spun around. The lamp in the corner clicked on. Moses Carter was sitting in the wingback chair in the shadows. He wasn't asleep in the bedroom. The breathing sound was coming from a white noise machine. Moses was dressed. He was wearing his suit. He was holding a glass of water. He looked calm, terrifyingly calm. You are rushing the tempo again, Gavin Moses said. Gavin scrambled back, knocking over a chair. Where are they? Gavin screamed, his voice cracking. Where are the tapes? They're in the hotel safe downstairs, Moses said, taking a sip of water. I moved them 3 hours ago. I knew you would come. I knew you couldn't resist. You are a predictable player, Gavin. You always go for the flashy solo, but you never check the acoustics of the room. You set me up, Gavin shouted. He looked at the suitcase. He looked at the window. He looked for an escape. This is entrapment. I will sue you. Moses shook his head slowly. Entrapment is when the police trick you into committing a crime you wouldn't otherwise commit, Moses said. I didn't trick you. I just left a door unlocked. You chose to walk through it. You chose to bribe a staff member. You chose to enter a dwelling that is not yours with the intent to steal. That is burglary, Gavin. In the first degree, Gavin laughed. It was a manic, broken sound. Burglary. Who are they going to believe? I am your son-in-law. I came to check on you. I came to get my wife's property. Moses pointed to the ceiling. Gavin looked up. In the corner of the room, a small red light was glowing on a security camera. I rented the suite, Gavin Moses said, but I brought my own security. That camera has been recording since you walked in. It recorded you bribing the maid. It recorded you opening the suitcase. It recorded your face when you realized you had lost. Gavin lunged. He didn't think. He just reacted. He grabbed the heavy glass ashtray from the table and raised it. Give me the combination, he screamed. Give it to me or I will kill you. Moses didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hands. He just looked at his watch. Right on time, he whispered. The door to the suite burst open. It didn't just open. It was kicked in. Police. Drop the weapon. 4 officers in tactical gear stormed the room. They had been waiting in the adjoining room the entire time. Moses had called them the moment the maid's keycard was swiped. Gavin froze. The ashtray was raised above his head. The red laser dots of the police rifles danced on his chest. Drop it. Now. Gavin looked at Moses. He looked at the guns. The reality of the situation crashed down on him like a collapsing building. It wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't a business deal. It was the end. The ashtray slipped from his fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. Gavin raised his hands. He started to cry. Ugly, sobbing tears. He invited me in. Gavin wailed. He told me to come. He is lying. He is crazy. Officer down on the ground now. The police didn't care about his excuses. They tackled him. Gavin's face was pressed into the expensive carpet. His hands were wrenched behind his back. The handcuffs clicked tight, tighter than he had ever felt anything before. You have the right to remain silent, the officer recited, dragging Gavin to his feet. Gavin looked at Moses one last time as they hauled him toward the door. Kesha will kill you for this, Gavin spat. She will never forgive you. You are destroying our family. Moses stood up slowly. He walked over to where Gavin was standing. He looked him in the eye. I am not destroying the family, Gavin Moses said. I am fumigating it. They dragged Gavin out. The door closed. The suite was quiet again. Moses picked up the suitcase. He removed the GPS tracker. He removed the note. He closed the lid. He walked to the window and looked down at the street. The rain was still falling. He saw the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers reflecting off the wet pavement. He saw them shove Gavin into the back seat. And then he saw her. Kesha. She was still standing on the corner across the street. She was huddled under the awning, soaking wet, shivering. She saw the police cars. She saw her husband being dragged out in handcuffs. She didn't run toward him. She didn't scream. She just stood there paralyzed. Moses took out his phone. He dialed the number for the precinct. Officer, he said, this is Moses Carter. Yes, I would like to press full charges, breaking and entering, attempted grand larceny, assault, and officer. Yes, Mr. Carter. There is a woman standing on the corner of 5th and Grand. Her name is Kesha. She is his wife. Do you want us to pick her up too? The officer asked. Is she an accomplice? Moses looked down at his daughter. He saw her slump against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the dirty sidewalk. She looked broken. No, Moses said. She didn't come inside. She isn't an accomplice. She is just a witness. Let her watch. He hung up. Down on the street, Kesha's phone rang. It was the one Gavin had taken from her, but the police had recovered it from his pocket and called the last dialed number. Mrs. Smith, a voice said, "This is Sergeant Miller. We have your husband in custody." Kesha dropped the phone. She looked at the police car driving away. She looked up at the penthouse window. She couldn't see Moses, but she knew he was there. She was alone, truly alone. The man she married was a criminal, the father she betrayed was a king, and she was just a girl in a red dress sitting in a puddle with absolutely nowhere to go. The county jail provides one phone call to new inmates. It is a privilege, not a right. Gavin Smith used his call at 6 in the morning. He didn't call a lawyer, he called the mansion. He called the landline because I had confiscated his cell phone as evidence. I wasn't there to hear it, but the house security system records all incoming calls to the main line. It is a feature Ruby insisted on years ago to screen out solicitors. I sat in my hotel room listening to the audio file. Kesha picked up on the third ring. Her voice was brittle. She sounded like she hadn't slept in 48 hours. "Hello?" Kesha Gavin screamed. The background noise of the holding cell was loud, men shouting, metal clanging. "Kesha, get me out of here. It is a nightmare. The guy in the next cell keeps looking at my shoes. You have to post bail. I can't." Gavin, Kesha whispered. "I told you, the accounts are frozen. Dad locked everything. Then sell the house." Gavin roared. "Sell it today. Call a cash buyer. Call those guys who put signs on telephone poles. I don't care if you get half price. Just get the cash. We have equity, Kesha. Millions in equity. It is your house. Your name is on the mail. Sell it and get me out." The call cut off. The automated voice announced that the inmate had run out of time. Kesha stood in the kitchen holding the dead receiver. The house was cold. The silence was heavy. "Sell the house," she whispered. It was a lifeline. A way out. If she sold the mansion, she could pay Gavin's bail. She could hire a shark of a lawyer to fight me. She could get a hotel room. She could buy her life back. She ran to the study. She started pulling open drawers. She was looking for the deed. She was looking for the title. She found a stack of files in Ruby's desk. She found the property tax records. She found the insurance papers. She grabbed the phone and dialed a real estate agent she knew, a woman named Linda, who had sold Gavin the condo he lived in before they got married. Linda, Kesha said, trying to sound calm. "It is Kesha Carter. I need to list the estate." "Yes. Today. I need an emergency sale. Cash offers only." I watched on the security camera as Kesha paced the room. She looked hopeful. For a moment she thought she had won. But then I saw a car pull up to the front gate. It wasn't a real estate agent. It was a courier service. A black sedan with a company logo on the side. The driver walked up to the intercom. He pressed the buzzer. "Delivery for Ms. Kesha Carter. Legal documents." Kesha ran to the gate. She thought it was the bail bondsman. She thought it was help. She signed for the envelope. It was thick, heavy. It had the seal of Benjamin Stein's law firm on the corner. She tore it open right there in the driveway, standing in her pajamas in the cold morning air. I knew what was inside. I had drafted it with Stein 3 hours ago. It wasn't a deed. It was a notice to quit, dear Ms. Carter. This letter serves as formal notification from Red Velvet LLC regarding the property located at 1500 Highland Drive. A review of company records indicates that you have no lease agreement, no ownership stake, and no employment contract with the corporation. As such, your occupancy of the premises is classified as unauthorized. Furthermore, given the attempted theft of company intellectual property by your spouse Bradley Gavin Smith, the Board of Directors has voted to revoke all guest privileges effective immediately. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Failure to comply will result in law enforcement removing you for criminal trespassing. Kesha dropped the letter. The wind caught the pages, blowing them across the driveway. She chased after them, scrambling on her hands and knees. She grabbed the last page. The deed. She read the line at the top. Owner of Record Red Velvet Limited Liability Company. She didn't own the house. She never owned the house. Ruby hadn't left it to her. Ruby had left it to the business, and the business was run by the man she had thrown out. Kesha sat on the pavement. The reality crashed down on her like a collapsing roof. She couldn't sell the house. She couldn't mortgage the house. She couldn't even sleep in the house. She was homeless. She looked up at the mansion. It loomed over her. The windows looked like dark eyes staring down in judgment. This was the house where she learned to walk. This was the house where she had her prom pictures taken. This was the house where she had told me to get out. Now the house was rejecting her. She stood up. She walked back inside. But she didn't run. She walked slowly like a person walking to the gallows. She went upstairs to her bedroom. She opened her closet. It was filled with designer clothes. Gucci, Prada, Balenciaga, thousands of dollars of fabric. She grabbed her Louis Vuitton suitcase. She tried to zip it open. The zipper jammed. She yanked it. It broke. She screamed, a primal, frustrated scream. She threw the expensive suitcase across the room. It hit the mirror, cracking her reflection. She looked around the room. She needed something to carry her things. She needed something big. She walked to the kitchen. She opened the pantry, and there it was. The roll of heavy-duty black trash bags. The same roll she had used 2 days ago to pack my life away. She stared at the box. Contractor bags. Extra strong. She laughed. It was a hysterical, broken sound. She ripped a bag off the roll. She snapped it open. The sound echoed through the empty house. She went back upstairs. She didn't pack everything. She couldn't. She realized that without a car, she could only take what she could carry on her back. She grabbed a few pairs of jeans, a warm sweater, a pair of sensible sneakers. She grabbed a photo of her mother from the nightstand. She hesitated, then she put it back face down. She didn't deserve to carry Ruby yet. She stuffed the clothes into the black plastic bag. She tied the knot at the top. She looked at herself in the broken mirror. The girl in the red dress was gone. The influencer was gone. Staring back at her was a woman with no makeup, messy hair, and eyes that were finally seeing the world clearly. She picked up the bag. It was heavy. She walked down the stairs. Her footsteps echoed on the marble. Clack, clack, clack. She walked to the front door. She didn't look back at the living room. She didn't look back at the kitchen. She opened the door. It was raining again. Of course it was raining. The city was washing away the sins of the Carter family. She stepped out onto the porch. She shivered. She walked down the steps. The same steps I had walked down 48 hours ago. She dragged the trash bag behind her. It scraped against the stone. The sound was identical to the sound my bag had made. Scrape, scrape, scrape. She reached the gate. She punched in the code to open it. It buzzed and swung open slowly. She stepped out onto the sidewalk. She turned around. The gate began to close automatically. She stood there holding her trash bag, watching the iron bars slide shut. She saw the house one last time through the metal gaps. It looked warm inside. It looked safe. But it was no longer hers. Clang. The gate locked. Kesha stood on the street. To her left was the city. To her right was the highway. She had no husband. He was in a cage. She had no father. He was in a penthouse. She had no mother. She was in an urn. She looked down at the black plastic bag in her hand. She realized with a jolt of horror that she had become exactly what she had called me. A burden. A person with no place. A person carrying their life in a sack. She didn't cry. She was done crying. Crying is for people who have hope that someone will hear them. Kesha knew no one was listening. She hoisted the bag onto her shoulder. She adjusted the weight. She started walking. Not toward the Ritz. Not toward the jail. She walked toward the bus stop. I watched her go on the security monitor. I saw her small figure disappear into the gray mist of the morning. My hand was hovering over the phone. I could have called her. I could have told the security guard to let her back in. I could have sent a car, but I didn't. Ruby's voice was in my head. Let her walk, Mo. Let her feel the pavement. You can't learn the rhythm if you don't feel the beat. I closed the laptop. The house was empty. The cycle was complete. Now the real work could begin. The park bench is a cruel teacher. It does not contour to the human spine. It does not retain heat. It is designed to be temporary, but for my daughter Kesha, it became her first bed in the new world. She had walked for 3 hours after the gate closed. Her feet were blistered in her designer sneakers. Her trash bag of clothes was heavy, dragging on the pavement like an anchor. She found a bench near the duck pond in the city park. It was dark. The city lights reflected off the water, looking like coins she couldn't reach. She sat down. She pulled her knees to her chest. She wrapped her expensive but thin coat around herself. She clutched her purse, the one containing her phone and her last $50 bill. She closed her eyes just for a moment, just to rest. When she opened them, the sun was up. The birds were singing, and her lap was empty. She sat up in a panic. She patted her pockets. She looked under the bench. Her purse was gone. Her phone was gone. Her ID was gone. The $50 bill was gone. She stood up and screamed. She spun around looking for a police officer, looking for anyone. But the park was empty except for a jogger who ran past her without even glancing at the disheveled woman screaming at the sky. She was a ghost. Without a phone, she had no connection to the world. Without an ID, she had no name. Without money, she had no power. She sat back down on the bench. The hunger hit her then. It wasn't the polite appetite she was used to, where she would order a salad and pick at the leaves. This was a primal, gnawing pain in the center of her stomach. She hadn't eaten since the funeral reception 2 days ago. She needed a job. She stood up. She smoothed her wrinkled clothes. She tried to fix her hair in the reflection of a shop window. She looked wild, but she told herself she was still Kesha Carter. She was still an influencer. She still had a brand. She walked into a high-end boutique on Fifth Avenue. The air conditioning was cold. The salesgirl looked up from her phone. She looked Kesha up and down. Her eyes lingered on the mud stains on Kesha's hem. "Can I help you?" the girl asked, her voice dripping with judgment. "I would like to speak to the manager," Kesha said, trying to summon her old authority. "I am the manager," the girl said, "and the restrooms are for customers only." "I am not here for the restroom," Kesha snapped. "I am here for a job. I know fashion. I have 2 million followers on Instagram. I can run your social media. I can style your mannequins." The girl laughed. She popped her gum. "Honey, we don't need a stylist. We need a stock girl to haul boxes in the basement. Can you lift 50 pounds? Can you stand on your feet for 8 hours? Do you have a valid address for tax forms?" Kesha froze. She didn't have an address. "I am between apartments right now," she stammered. The girl pointed to the door. "We aren't hiring. Try the shelter on 3rd Street. They are always looking for people to clean the soup pots." Kesha walked out. Her face burned. She tried a coffee shop next. The barista asked if she knew how to operate an espresso machine. She said no, but she could learn. He told her they needed someone with experience. She tried a bookstore. They asked for a resume. She said she was a content creator. The owner looked at her confused and said they needed someone to mop the floors. By 4 in the afternoon, Kesha had been rejected 10 times. Her legs were shaking. Her head was pounding. The hunger was no longer a pain, it was a dizziness. She was walking, but she didn't know where she was going. Her feet seemed to have a memory of their own. They led her away from the shiny glass towers of downtown. They led her past the boutiques she used to shop in. They led her to the bottoms, the neighborhood under the highway, the place where I had gone the night she kicked me out. She didn't mean to go there, but gravity pulls everything down, and she was at the bottom. The sun was setting, casting long shadows under the concrete overpass. The air smelled of exhaust and burning wood. There was a fire barrel burning in the center of a small encampment of tents. Men and women sat around it warming their hands. Kesha stopped. She tried to turn back. She was terrified. These were the people she used to lock her car doors against. These were the invisible people. "Hey, Red." "Dress," a voice called out. Kesha froze. She clutched her trash bag of clothes. She looked for a weapon. She looked for an escape route. A young man stepped out of the shadows. He was wearing a hoodie and worn-out boots. It was Darius, the same Darius who had offered me coffee. He squinted at her. He walked closer. The firelight danced on his face, revealing the scar on his eyebrow. "I know you," Darius said. Kesha took a step back. "Stay away from me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't have anything. I was already robbed. Leave me alone." Darius laughed softly. He didn't look aggressive. He looked curious. "I ain't gonna rob you, girl," he said. "You look like you already lost everything worth taking. I know your face. You are Mo's daughter." Kesha flinched. She expected the anger. She expected him to yell at her. Everyone knew what she had done. It was on the news. It was on the internet. "Yeah," she said defiantly, raising her chin. "I am his daughter. Go ahead. Say it. Tell me I am a monster. Tell me I deserve this." Darius shook his head. He turned to the other men around the fire. "Yo, guys," he called out. "It is Mo's girl, the one he was talking about." The other men looked up. They didn't look angry. They looked sad. They looked at her with a heavy pity that was worse than hatred. Darius reached into a paper bag he was holding. He pulled out a sandwich. It was a sub sandwich wrapped in white paper. Half of it was eaten. The bread was stale, the edges hard. "You hungry?" Darius asked. Kesha stared at the food. Her stomach roared. Her mouth watered. Her pride fought a war with her biology. "I am fine," she lied. "You ain't fine," Darius said. "You are shaking. Sit down." He pointed to an overturned milk crate near the fire. Kesha hesitated. Then her knees gave out. She sat down hard on the crate. The warmth of the fire hit her face. Darius broke the half sandwich in two. He handed the bigger piece to her. "Eat," he commanded. Kesha took it. Her hands were trembling so bad she almost dropped it. She took a bite. It was just ham and cheese and old bread. But to her starving body it tasted like salvation. She chewed slowly, trying not to choke. "Why are you helping me?" she asked between bites. Her voice was thick with tears. I kicked him out. I threw his suitcase in the rain. I am the villain. Don't you watch TV? We don't watch TV down here, Darius said, poking the fire with a stick. We listen to people, and we listen to your dad. Kesha stopped chewing. He was here, she asked. Yeah, Darius said. 2 nights ago, before he went to the hotel. He sat right there on that curb. He was wet, he was cold. He looked like his heart had been ripped out of his chest. Kesha looked down at the ground. I bet he hates me, she whispered. I bet he told you I was ungrateful. I bet he told you I was a waste of space. Darius looked at her. His eyes were serious. Nah, he said. He didn't say any of that. Kesha looked up. What did he say? He said he was worried about you, Darius said. He sat there holding that urn, and he told us that you were lost. He said the money had blinded you. He said you were a good kid who got caught up in a bad rhythm. He said Gavin was playing a false note and you were just trying to dance to it. Kesha felt a lump form in her throat, a lump so big she couldn't swallow the bread. He defended me, she asked. He prayed for you, Darius said. He asked us to look out for you. He said, if you see my girl down here, don't scare her. She is just learning how to walk. The tears came then. They didn't trickle. They exploded. Kesha dropped the sandwich on her lap. She covered her face with her dirty hands and she sobbed. She had spent 48 hours convincing herself that I was the enemy, that I was a vindictive old man punishing her. But here, in the light of a trash fire, she heard the truth. I hadn't punished her. I had loved her enough to let her fall. He never hated me, she sobbed, rocking back and forth. He never hated me. Nah, Darius said softly. Fathers don't hate their kids. They just get tired of watching them burn themselves. But Mo is solid. He is like this concrete. He is still holding you up even when you don't see him. He reached out and patted her shoulder. His hand was rough but gentle. Eat the bread, girl, Darius said. You are going to need your strength. The climb back up is harder than the fall down. Kesha picked up the sandwich again. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. She took another bite. She ate it through her tears. She tasted the salt of her own regret mixing with the ham. For the first time in her life, she wasn't eating to be seen. She wasn't eating at a Michelin star restaurant to post a photo. She was eating to survive. And the person feeding her wasn't a wealthy suitor or a sycophant fan. It was a boy who had nothing but was willing to share half of it. She looked around the circle of men. They were nodding at her, welcoming her, not as a princess, but as a human being who was cold and hungry. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank us, Darius said. Thank Mo. He taught us that when you have a little, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. Kesha looked into the fire. She saw the flames dancing. She felt the warmth. And somewhere inside her, the ice that Gavin had built around her heart began to crack. She finished the sandwich. She folded the wrapper neatly and put it in her pocket. She wasn't ready to come to me yet. She knew that. She had eaten the bread, but she hadn't done the work. But as she sat there under the highway, she made a promise to herself. She would pay Darius back for this sandwich, and she would pay me back for the tears. 7 days is a long time when you are hungry. In the Bible, it took 7 days to create the world. For my daughter Kesha, it took 7 days to destroy her ego. She had spent a week living in the shadow of the city, sleeping in shelters when she could, and on benches when she couldn't. She had learned the geography of survival. She knew which churches gave out coffee and which alleys were safe from the wind. But the hunger she felt wasn't just in her stomach anymore. It was a hunger for forgiveness. On a Tuesday morning under a gray slate sky, Kesha walked into the lobby of Benjamin Stein's law firm. She didn't march in like she had at the Ritz. She didn't click her heels on the marble floor because she wasn't wearing heels. She was wearing the sneakers she had taken from the mansion, now scuffed and gray. Her coat was stained. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, messy bun. The receptionist looked up. She reached for the phone, ready to call security. She saw a homeless woman. I am here to see Mr. Stein, Kesha whispered. Her voice was raspy. She hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked, her hand hovering over the panic button. Please, Kesha said. Just tell him it is Kesha. Tell him I don't want money. I just want to know if my father is okay." The receptionist paused. She looked at Kesha's eyes. They were the same eyes as the man in the portraits on the wall, but they were haunted. "Wait here," she said. Upstairs in the main office, I was sitting in a leather chair facing a bank of monitors. Stein was standing next to me. On the screen, we could see the lobby feed. We saw Kesha standing there, hugging herself, trying to make herself small. "She looks bad," Mo Stein said softly. "She looks like she hasn't eaten a hot meal in days. Should I let her up?" My hand gripped the armrest of the chair. Every instinct in my body screamed yes. I wanted to run down there. I wanted to wrap her in a blanket and take her home. I wanted to be her father again. But then I remembered the check she had tried to cash with my dignity. I remembered the way she looked at Gavin when he mocked me. If I bring her up now, I said, my voice thick with emotion, she will just cry. She will apologize because she is cold, not because she is changed. She needs to understand the value of the connection, Ben. She needs to earn the meeting. "What do you want me to do?" Stein asked. I pulled a notepad toward me. I wrote a single sentence. I tore the page off and handed it to Stein. "Give her this," I said, "and tell her I am watching." Stein took the paper. He looked at it and nodded. He understood. He walked out of the office. I watched on the monitor as Stein stepped off the elevator in the lobby. Kesha looked up. Her face lit up with a fragile hope. She took a step forward. "Mr. Stein," she said. "Is he here? Is Dad here? Can I see him?" Stein stopped a few feet away. He didn't offer a handshake. He maintained the professional distance of a lawyer executing a will. "He is here," Kesha Stein said, "but he is not ready to see you." Kesha's shoulders slumped. The hope vanished, replaced by a crushing defeat. "He hates me," she whispered. "No," Stein said. "He doesn't hate you. If he hated you, he would have filed a restraining order. But he has conditions." "Conditions?" Kesha asked. Stein handed her the piece of paper. Kesha took it. Her hands were trembling. She read the note. "If you want to see me, you must buy your ticket. The price is $100, earned, not borrowed, not stolen, earned by the sweat of your brow." Kesha looked up at Stein. $100, she said, confused. "But I don't have any money. I can't borrow it. No one will lend to me." "That is the point," Stein said. "Moses doesn't want your money, Kesha. He has millions. He wants your labor. He wants to see if you are capable of working for something other than yourself." He pointed to the door. "Go get a job, Kesha. Scrub floors. Wash cars. I don't care. But don't come back here until you have a crisp $100 bill that you sweated for." Kesha looked at the paper again. $100. A week ago, that was the tip she left for a manicure. Now it was a mountain. She looked at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. She knew I was behind it. "Okay," she whispered to the lens. "Okay, Dad. I get it." She turned and walked out of the lobby. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She just walked out into the rain with a mission. I watched her go. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "She is going to fail," Stein said, coming back into the room. "She has never worked a day in her life, Mo. She doesn't have any skills." I smiled. A sad, proud smile. "She has one skill, Ben," I said. "She is stubborn. She gets that from her mother." Kesha walked for 10 blocks. She went to every help wanted sign she saw. But this time she didn't ask to be a manager. She didn't ask to run social media. She walked into a taco shop called the Greasy Spoon. It smelled of old fryer oil and onions. The floor was sticky. The manager, a sweating man named Sal, looked at her skeptical. "I need a dishwasher," Sal said, pointing to a pile of dirty trays that reached the ceiling. "Minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. Cash under the table because you don't look like you have papers." "I will take it," Kesha said instantly. "You ever wash dishes?" Sal asked, eyeing her hands. "No," Kesha admitted, "but I learned fast." "Apron is in the back," Sal grunted. "Start now. You break it, you buy it." Kesha walked into the kitchen. The heat hit her like a physical blow. It was 100 degrees in there. The steam from the dishwasher machine hissed and spat. She put on the rubber apron. It was too big for her. She put on the gloves. She picked up the first tray. It was covered in half-eaten burritos and salsa. The smell made her stomach turn. She scraped the food into the trash. She sprayed the tray. The hot water splashed back, hitting her face. She flinched. "Hey," Princess Sal yelled from the grill. "Faster, we got a lunch rush coming." Kesha grit her teeth. She scrubbed. For the first hour she thought she was going to die. Her back ached. Her feet, which were already blistered, throbbed in time with the music blasting from the radio. Her hands inside the gloves started to sweat and chafe, but she kept scrubbing. She thought about the red dress. She scrubbed harder. She thought about Gavin laughing at her. She scrubbed harder. She thought about me standing in the doorway of the mansion holding the urn. She scrubbed until her arms went numb. By the fourth hour she had found a rhythm. Spray, scrub, rack, push, spray, scrub, rack, push. It was a brutal, mindless rhythm, but it was honest. She worked for 8 hours. When Sal told her to clock out, she could barely stand. She walked to the counter. Sal opened the register. He counted out $58. "See you tomorrow," Sal asked. Kesha looked at the money. It was greasy. It smelled like tacos. "Yes," she said. "I will be here." She slept in the park again that night, but this time she slept deep, the sleep of the exhausted. She went back the next day, and the next. On the third day, the dishwasher broke. Sal was frantic. "I gotta close," he yelled. "The health inspector is coming." Kesha looked at the machine. She didn't know engineering, but she knew how to Google. She borrowed Sal's phone. She looked up the manual. She found a clogged filter. She reached into the disgusting drain filled with 3 days of sludge and pulled out a blockage of plastic forks. The machine roared back to life. Sal looked at her. "You fixed it," he said, amazed. "I just unclogged it," Kesha said, wiping slime off her arm. Sal reached into the tip jar. He pulled out an extra 20. "Good job, kid," he said. By Friday, Kesha had $120. She went to a currency exchange. She traded the small bills, the ones that smelled of onions and sweat, for a single crisp $100 bill. She held it up to the light. Benjamin Franklin looked back at her. It was just a piece of paper. But to Kesha, it felt heavier than the gold credit card she used to carry. She went to a gas station bathroom. She washed her face. She tried to clean the grease from under her fingernails, but it wouldn't come out. Her hands were red raw and covered in small burns from the hot water. She looked in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked old, but she looked real. She walked back to Stein's office. It was 5 p.m. on Friday. The receptionist saw her coming. This time she didn't reach for the phone. She nodded. "He is expecting you," the receptionist said. Kesha walked to the elevator. Her heart was pounding. She rode up to the 10th floor. The doors opened. Stein was standing there. But behind him, sitting at the conference table, was me. I was watching the door. I saw her walk in. She didn't run to me. She walked slowly. She stopped at the edge of the table. She didn't say hello. She didn't say, "I am sorry." She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the bill. She smoothed it out on the mahogany table. It was slightly wrinkled from being in her pocket. $100, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse from the kitchen smoke. I looked at the money, then I looked at her hands. I saw the burns. I saw the broken nails. I saw the raw skin. "Where did you get this, Kesha?" I asked, my voice quiet. "The greasy spoon," she said. "I washed dishes. 4 days. Double shifts." I stood up. I walked over to the table. I picked up the bill. I held it up to the light. "It is real," I said. "It is real," Kesha said, tears welling up in her eyes. "It is the only real thing I have ever owned, Dad." I looked at her. I saw the daughter I had lost 10 years ago to the illusion of wealth. She was back. She was dirty, she was smelly, and she was exhausted. But she was back. I put the bill in my pocket. "You passed the test," I said. Kesha let out a sob. She swayed on her feet. She was ready to collapse. I walked around the table. I didn't hug her yet. I wasn't done teaching. But the lesson had changed. "Come with me," I said. "Where?" she asked, wiping her eyes. "To the roof," I said. "We need to talk about the future, and the view is better from up there." I walked toward the stairs. Kesha followed me. She walked with a limp. Her feet hurt, but she kept up. She had paid the admission fee. She had earned the right to be in the room. And as we walked up the stairs, I knew that Ruby was smiling somewhere. The suitcase was open. The money was gone. But the music was finally starting to sound like a harmony. The wind on the roof of the Stein building is strong enough to knock a weak man down. It howls through the steel girders of the city skyline, carrying the scent of rain and ozone. We were 40 stories up. The cars down on the street looked like toys, the same toys my daughter used to cry over when she was a child. But Kesha wasn't crying now. She was standing at the edge of the parapet, clutching the railing with hands that were red and raw from 3 days of scrubbing dishes in a taco shop. I stood a few feet behind her. I was wearing my wool coat, the one Ruby bought me. Kesha was wearing an oversized hoodie she had probably found in a donation bin. Her designer boots were ruined, scuffed gray by the pavement. She looked like a wreck, but to me she looked beautiful because for the first time in 10 years, she looked real. She turned around to face me. The wind whipped loose strands of hair across her face. She didn't brush them away. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the bill. The $100 bill she had exchanged her small, greasy change for. She walked toward me. She didn't swagger. She didn't strut. She walked with a limp because her feet were blistered. She stopped 2 feet away. She held out the money. "Here," Kesha said. Her voice was thin, carried away by the wind. $100. I looked at the bill. It was wrinkled. It had a small stain of salsa on the corner. It wasn't the crisp, clean money she used to pull out of my wallet. I took it. I held it up to the gray light of the sky. "Tell me how you got this, Kesha," I asked. "I told you," Kesha said, looking at her shoes. "I washed dishes." "No," I said. "Tell me the truth. Tell me what it felt like." Kesha looked up. Her eyes were dark with exhaustion. "It felt heavy," she whispered. "It felt like my back was breaking. It felt like time was moving too slow. Every hour felt like a day. And the manager, he yelled at me. He called me stupid. He told me I was too slow." "And what did you do?" I asked. "Did you tell him who your father was? Did you tell him you were an influencer?" "No," Kesha said. "I just scrubbed harder. Because I needed the money. I needed to eat. And I needed to see you." I nodded. I folded the bill carefully and put it in my breast pocket, right next to my heart. "This is the most valuable money you have ever given me," I said. Kesha let out a shaky breath. "I am sorry, Dad," she said. "And I don't mean I am sorry I got caught. I am sorry I was blind." She took a step closer. "It wasn't just Gavin," she said. "I blamed him. I told myself he manipulated me. And he did. He is a predator. But I let him in, Dad. I opened the door. I gave him the keys because I wanted what he promised. I wanted the easy life. I wanted the flash. I was greedy." She looked at the city below us. "I sold Mom's memory for a Porsche," she whispered. "I tried to sell your house for a bail bond. I am broken, Dad. I don't know who I am anymore." I looked at her. I saw the crack in the facade. That was what I had been waiting for. You can't pour new concrete until you break up the old foundation. I walked over to the small concrete bench on the roof. I had brought the leather suitcase with me. It was sitting there battered and worn. I sat down. I patted the space next to me. "Sit down, Kesha." She sat. She was shivering. I took off my scarf and wrapped it around her neck. She flinched, then she leaned into the warmth. I opened the suitcase. I didn't take out the tapes. I didn't take out the contracts. I took out a small black book. It was bound in velvet, Ruby's diary. "You think your mother spoiled you because she was proud of you," I said. "You think she gave you that black card because she wanted you to be a queen." Kesha nodded, wiping her nose. "She loved me," Kesha said. "She gave me everything." I opened the book. The pages were brittle. "She loved you." "Yes," I said. "But she was terrified of you." Kesha froze. "Terrified?" she asked. I turned to a page marked with a blue ribbon. It was dated 3 years ago, the day Kesha announced her engagement to Gavin. "Read this," I said. I handed her the book. Kesha took it with trembling hands. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the same script that wrote the lyrics to the world's favorite love songs. Kesha began to read aloud, her voice shaking. October 14th. Kesha brought him home today. Gavin. He wears sunglasses inside. He talks about money like it is a game. I looked at my daughter and I didn't see my baby anymore. I saw a stranger. She looked at me and she didn't see her mother. She saw a bank. She saw an ATM. I tried to hug her and she pulled away because she didn't want to wrinkle her dress. Kesha stopped. A tear fell onto the page. "Read the next part," I said gently. Kesha swallowed hard. "I have created a monster Mo. We gave her too much. We shielded her from the rain, and now she doesn't know how to grow roots. I give her money because it is the only language she speaks now. If I stop paying, she stops visiting. and I am too selfish to let her go. So I pay. I pay for her love, and it is killing me. Kesha dropped the book. It landed on the concrete. She pays for my love, she whispered. She covered her mouth with her hand. A sob escaped her throat, a deep, guttural sound of pure agony. She thought I only loved her for the money, Kesha cried. I picked up the book. I brushed the dust off the cover. She knew you loved her, I said. But she knew the money was the wall between you. She wanted to tear it down, but she didn't know how. She was too soft, Kesha. She was the melody. She couldn't bring the hammer down. I looked at Kesha. That is why she left the company to me, I said. That is why she put the house in the LLC. She made me promise. She said, Mo, when I am gone, you have to do the hard thing. You have to break the bank to save the child. Kesha slid off the bench. She fell to her knees on the cold roof tiles. She grabbed the hem of my coat. I am so sorry, she wailed. I am so sorry, Mommy. I didn't know. I got lost. She buried her face in my coat. She cried like she hadn't cried since she was 5 years old and scraped her knee. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was a scraped soul. I let her cry. I sat there looking out at the skyline while my daughter wept the toxicity out of her system. I felt her tears soaking through the wool. I felt her shaking. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a wallet. I felt like a father. When the sobs turned to hiccups, I reached out. My hand, the hand that had played bass on platinum records, the hand that had signed the eviction notice, rested on her head. I stroked her hair. It was messy and tangled, not the sleek blowout she used to have. Get up, Kesha, I said softly. She looked up. Her face was swollen. Her eyes were red. I can't, she whispered. I don't have anywhere to go, Dad. The house is gone. Gavin is gone. I have $12 left. I stood up. I pulled her up with me. She was light, too thin. You are not going back to the house, I said. That house is a museum of your mistakes, and you are not going back to the Ritz. That is my tempo, not yours. Then where Kesha asked, the shelter. No, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. It wasn't a gold key. It was a simple silver key with a yellow plastic tag. This is for an apartment on 42nd Street, I said. It is a studio, 4th floor walk-up, no doorman, no elevator. It has a radiator that clanks and a window that looks at a brick wall. Kesha took the key. She looked at it like it was a diamond. I paid the rent for 3 months, I said. The fridge is empty. The lights are on, but the internet is not. Thank you, she whispered, clutching the key. Thank you, Dad. I am not done, I said. I pointed to the city below. The greasy spoon. Sal says you are a good worker. He says you fix things. He offered me a full-time shift, Kesha said. Take it, I said. But Dad, it is minimum wage. Exactly, I said. You are going to work there. You are going to pay your own electric bill. You are going to buy your own groceries. And every Sunday, you are going to come to the cemetery with me. To see Mom, she asked. To tell her you are sorry, I said. And to tell her about your week. Not about the things you bought, but about the work you did. I looked her in the eye. This is the deal, Kesha. You want to be a Carter. You start from the bottom, just like I did, just like Ruby did. Kesha wiped her face with her sleeve. She stood up straighter. The wind was still blowing, but she wasn't shivering anymore. I will do it, she said. I will work. I will pay you back every cent. I don't want the money back, I said, tapping my breast pocket where the $100 bill sat. I already have the profit. I picked up the suitcase. Come on, I said. I will walk you to the subway. The subway, Kesha asked. Yeah, I smiled. The bass player takes the train. The princess used to take the Porsche. But the princess is retired. We walked to the elevator. The doors opened. We stepped in. As we descended, leaving the high winds of the roof behind, I watched the numbers count down. 40, 30, 20. We were going down to the ground level, back to the street, back to reality. But for the first time in a long time, the direction didn't matter. What mattered was who was standing next to me. I looked at Kesha holding her cheap key and wearing my scarf. She wasn't rich anymore. She wasn't famous. But she was my daughter, and that was a start. 3 months is a long time in the life of a building. It is long enough for a mansion to be sold packed up and stripped of its soul. I watched the for sale sign go up on the lawn of 1500 Highland Drive. I watched the open house where strangers walked through Ruby's kitchen criticizing her wallpaper. I watched the auction where a tech billionaire bought the place for $6 million cash. He wanted to tear it down. He said he wanted to build something modern, something glass and steel. I signed the papers. I handed over the keys. I didn't feel a thing. A house is just wood and stone. A home is where the music plays, and the music had left that house a long time ago. Kesha asked me once if she could have the money. Just a little bit. Just enough to buy a condo downtown. I told her no. I told her that money was cursed. It was the money that had poisoned her marriage. It was the money that had made her weak. So I took the $6 million. I took the proceeds from the Ferrari, the Porsche, and the Rolls-Royce. I put it all into a new account. Then I drove down to the bottoms. I found an old warehouse on 4th Street. It used to be a textile factory back in the 50s. It had high ceilings, brick walls, and broken windows. It smelled of dust and neglect. It was perfect. I bought it. I hired a crew. We spent 2 months sandblasting the brick, putting in new floors and soundproofing the rooms. We hung a sign above the door, a simple wooden sign hand-painted in red and gold, the Ruby Carter Music Center. It wasn't a school for the elite. It was a sanctuary for the forgotten. We offered free lessons, free instrument rentals, free lunch for any kid who showed up and was willing to practice. On opening day, the line wrapped around the block. Kids with holes in their sneakers. Kids who had never held a violin in their lives. They came because they heard the music. And standing at the front desk wearing a blue polo shirt that was 2 sizes too big was my daughter. Kesha didn't want the job. Not at first. When I told her I was opening the center, she thought I was going to make her the director. She thought she would have an office with a view. I handed her a mop bucket. "You are the operations associate," I told her. "What does that mean?" she asked, looking at the gray water. "It means you answer the phone," I said. "You sign the kids in. And when little Timmy spills his juice box in the hallway, you clean it up." Kesha looked at me. She looked at the mop. "Dad," she whispered, "I can't do this. People will see me. My followers. They will laugh at me." "Let them laugh," I said. "Laughter doesn't pay the rent, Kesha. This job pays $15 an hour. Take it or leave it." She took it. She needed the rent money for her walk-up apartment. The first week was brutal. I watched her from my office on the 2nd floor. She stood behind the reception desk trying to hide her face every time the door opened. She flinched when the brass instruments started practicing because it was loud and chaotic. She scrubbed the floors with a scowl on her face, muttering under her breath. She hated it. She hated the noise. She hated the smell of cheap floor wax. She hated that she wasn't the center of attention. But then the 2nd week happened. I was tuning a piano in the main hall. It was late afternoon. The sun was streaming through the high windows. A little girl named Maya was sitting in the corner. Maya was 8 years old. She lived in a foster home 3 blocks away. She was trying to play the cello, but she was crying. She was frustrated. Her fingers were too small. The bow was squeaking. Kesha was sweeping the floor nearby. She stopped. She looked at the girl. Usually Kesha would have walked away. She didn't like crying children. They were messy. But this time she leaned the broom against the wall. She walked over. "Hey," Kesha said softly. "It sounds like you are strangling a cat." Maya looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do it." Maya sniffed. "My hands are stupid." Kesha knelt down. She wasn't a musician. She couldn't teach the notes. But she knew about appearances. She knew about posture. "You are slouching," Kesha said. "Look at you. You are curled up like a shrimp. If you want to play big, you have to look big." Maya wiped her nose. "How?" Kesha asked. Kesha stood up. She struck a pose. Shoulders back, chin up. It was the pose she used on the red carpet. Like this, Kesha said. "Imagine you are a queen. Imagine everyone is looking at you. If you look confident, the instrument gets scared of you. You have to boss it around." Maya giggled. She sat up straighter. She held the cello with a little more grip. "Now try," Kesha said. Maya pulled the bow. It wasn't perfect, but the squeak was gone. It was a clear, deep note. Maya's eyes went wide. "I did it," she whispered. Kesha smiled. It wasn't her camera smile. It was a real smile. A small, genuine curve of the lips. "Yeah, you did," Kesha said. She pulled out her phone. It was an older model now since she had pawned the new one, but the camera still worked. "Do that again," Kesha said. "Let me record it. You look like a rock star." Maya played the note again, beaming with pride. Kesha filmed it. She edited it right there, adding a cool filter and a beat in the background. She showed it to Maya. Maya gasped. "Is that me?" "That is you," Kesha said. That night, Kesha posted the video on her old Instagram account. She hadn't posted in months. She wrote a simple caption. "This is Maya. She is 8. She just bossed this cello around. Come to the Ruby Carter Center. We are making noise." The next morning when I walked in, the phone was ringing off the hook. Kesha was answering it. She had a headset on. She was typing furiously on the computer. "Whoa, slow down," she was saying. "Yes, we accept donations. Yes, we need more cellos. Thank you. Thank you so much." She looked up at me. Her eyes were bright. "Dad," she said breathless. "The video, it went viral. Not huge, but meaningful. People are donating instruments. A guy from a music store in Jersey wants to send 20 stands." I looked at the mop bucket in the corner. It was still full, but the floor was clean. I looked at my daughter. She was wearing her blue polo shirt. Her hair was in a ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup. "You used your platform," I said. "I used my influence," Kesha corrected me, "but for something real this time." She picked up the phone again. Another donor. I walked into my office and closed the door. I sat down and looked at the picture of Ruby on my desk. "She is getting it, Ruby," I whispered. "It took a mop and a cello, but she is getting it." Kesha worked there for 6 months. She never asked for a raise. She never asked for her old job back. She learned the names of every kid. She learned how to fix a jammed copier. She learned that respect isn't something you buy, it is something you build every day when you show up to do the work you don't want to do. One Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. It wasn't a donor. Kesha picked it up. "Ruby Carter Music Center." "How can I help you?" she said cheerfully. There was a pause on the other end. Then a mechanical voice spoke. "This is a collect call from the State Correctional Facility, inmate Bradley Gavin Smith. To accept charges, press 1. Kesha froze. Her hand hovered over the keypad. She looked around the lobby. Maya was practicing in the corner. 2 boys were laughing carrying a drum set. The air was filled with life. She pressed 1. "Hello," Kesha said, her voice steady. Kesha Gavin's voice came through the line. It sounded desperate, angry, and small. "Kesha, why haven't you visited? I have been in here for months." "I have been busy, Gavin," Kesha said. "Busy doing what?" Gavin snapped. "Scrubbing toilets. I heard about your job. It is embarrassing, Kesha. You are a carter. You are mopping floors for minimum wage. I am managing operations," Kesha said coolly. "Whatever," Gavin spat. "Listen to me. My lawyer says there is a loophole. If you can get your dad to sign a character reference, if you can get him to say I was a good husband, maybe I can get early parole. You have to ask him, Kesha. You owe me." Kesha looked at the mop bucket. She looked at the sign on the wall that said, "Music Heals." "I don't owe you anything, Gavin," she said. "What did you say?" Gavin yelled. "I made you. I gave you the lifestyle." "You gave me an illusion," Kesha said, "and it cost me my family. I am paying off that debt now, and I am doing it with my own hands." "Kesha, don't you dare hang up on me," Gavin screamed. "If you hang up, I will—" "You will what Kesha asked. You are in a cage, Gavin, and I am free." She looked at Maya, who was waving at her from across the room. "I have to go," Kesha said. "Don't, Kesha, please." Gavin begged, his voice breaking. "I am lonely. I have nobody." Kesha paused. She felt a flicker of pity. But it was the pity you feel for a character in a movie, not for a person in your life. "I am sorry you are lonely," Kesha said, "but I can't help you." "Why not?" Gavin whispered. "Because I am working," Kesha said. She pressed the button. The line went dead. She took the headset off. She placed it gently on the desk. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She picked up her clipboard. She walked out from behind the desk. Maya needed help with her sheet music. The delivery truck was here with the new music stands. There was work to be done. Real work. And for the first time in her life, Kesha Carter was exactly where she was supposed to be. Justice is a song that takes a long time to resolve, but when the final chord hits, it resonates forever. For my son-in-law, Gavin Smith, the music stopped inside a 6-by-8-foot concrete cell. He didn't learn the lesson. Some men are built of stone and can be reshaped, but Gavin was built of sand. Even in prison, he tried to hustle. He tried to run a crypto scam using commissary stamps, trading cigarettes for promises of imaginary wealth. He targeted the wrong people. He targeted desperate men who didn't care about the metaverse. When the scheme collapsed, the warden found him hiding under his bunk, terrified and bruised. The judge didn't see a visionary. He saw a predator who refused to stop hunting even in a cage. He added 5 years to Gavin's sentence for fraud and solicitation. Gavin will be 40 years old when he sees the sky without bars. He will have no wife. He will have no money. He will have nothing but the echo of his own arrogance. I didn't visit him. I didn't write him. I simply closed the book on that chapter of our lives. My daughter Kesha, however, wrote a new chapter. It wasn't written in ink on a checkbook. It was written in sweat and laughter. She didn't move back into the mansion. The new owner tore it down last week. I drove past the pile of rubble that used to be our home. I felt a pang of nostalgia, but then I looked at the passenger seat of my old truck. Sitting there was a bag of fresh bagels for the staff meeting. That was my reality now. Kesha found a studio apartment on the east side. It is small. The radiator clanks and the view is of a brick wall, but she painted it yellow. She bought a second-hand bicycle with a basket. Every morning she rides 12 blocks to the Ruby Carter Music Center. She pedals past the luxury car dealerships and she doesn't even turn her head. She is the communications manager now. It sounds fancy, but mostly it means she tells the stories of the children we help. She uses her phone not to filter her face, but to amplify their voices. Last week she organized a fundraiser that brought in 50 new violins. She stood at the podium and spoke. She didn't talk about herself. She talked about the music. I watched her yesterday. She was sitting on the floor of the lobby helping a 6-year-old boy tie his shoes. She was laughing. It wasn't the practiced laugh of a socialite trying to charm a donor. It was a belly laugh. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. She looked tired, but she looked light. She had shed the weight of expectation. She was no longer carrying the burden of being rich. She was just Kesha. And for the first time in 30 years, I recognized my daughter. On Sunday afternoon, I took a walk to the city park. It was the same park where Kesha had slept on a bench the night she hit rock bottom. I walked past that bench. I touched the cold wood. It was a monument to her resilience. I walked to a quiet spot under an old oak tree. I had the leather suitcase with me. It was lighter now. The tapes were in a secure vault. The contracts were filed with the lawyers. The money was in the foundation's account doing good work. The suitcase was almost empty. I sat down on the grass. I opened the latches. Click, click. The smell of lavender and old paper drifted up. It was faint now, but it was still there. The ghost of Ruby. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a photograph. It was a picture taken at the memorial concert. It showed me standing on stage holding my bass. Next to me was Kesha holding the microphone. We were both looking at each other, not at the camera. We were sweaty. We were exhausted, but we were beaming. We looked like a team. I placed the photograph into the suitcase. I placed it right on top of the old diary. I ran my hand over the velvet lining. "You see this, Ruby?" I whispered to the wind. "You see what we did?" The wind rustled the leaves above me. It sounded like a whisper. "We didn't leave her a mountain of gold," I said. "If we had left her the gold, she would have been buried under it. She would have suffocated Ruby. She would have stayed that hollow girl in the red dress forever." I touched the face of my daughter in the photo. "We left her something better," I said. "We left her a shovel. We left her the hard ground and the calluses on her hands. We forced her to dig Ruby, and she found it. She found the vein of gold inside her own soul." I looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant blue, the color of a perfect chord. "She is happy, Ruby," I said. "She is riding a bike and eating tacos and working for a paycheck. She is paying her own rent. She is free." I felt a peace settle over me. It was the feeling of the final measure of a long symphony. The tension was resolved. The dissonance was gone. The harmony was restored. I closed the lid of the suitcase. Snap, snap. I stood up. My knees popped. I was getting old, but I still had work to do. I had a meeting with Kesha at 2 o'clock. We were planning the summer curriculum. She had some big ideas about a digital music program. She wanted to teach the kids how to produce their own beats. She said she wanted to help them own their masters from day one. I smiled. She was learning. She was definitely learning. I picked up the suitcase. I walked out of the park. I walked past the bench where she had cried. I walked past the luxury hotel where I had trapped Gavin. I walked toward the bus stop. I didn't need a Ferrari. I didn't need a mansion. I had a bass guitar. I had a suitcase full of memories. And I had a daughter who knew my name. The music plays on. The weight of the suitcase. We spend our lives trying to fill our suitcases with gold titles and shiny things thinking they will buy us respect. My daughter thought the mansion made her a queen and the Ferrari made her fast. But when the crash came, she realized those things were just heavy anchors dragging her down. True wealth isn't what you can lock in a vault. It is what you can carry in your heart when the vault is locked against you. It is the resilience to sleep on a park bench and still keep your dignity. It is the humility to wash dishes to earn a clean dollar. Ruby left behind a suitcase of songs, but the real melody she wrote was the lesson of redemption. You can inherit money, but you cannot inherit character. That you have to build yourself one humble brick at a time. If you enjoyed this story of tough love and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that it is never too late to start over. And tell me in the comments what is the most valuable lesson you have learned that money couldn't buy. I will see you in the next story.